Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, leaving a trail of white smoke as she was flung a great distance with a comical yell. Her body even passed by where Luffy and Bullet were fighting. Still, Lucy quickly recovered, spinning midair before turning her focus back to the blue dragon. Adjusting her body in the air, she began to run, floating as if the sky were solid beneath her feet. Luffy glanced at her briefly, looking stunned. He wasn't used to seeing something like this. Even Nika's abilities left him amazed. As Lucy returned to face the dragon, Onigashima was filled with the sounds of explosions, with the main battles now boiling down to just 2 pairs of combatants, while the rest watched intently. Meanwhile, the other Straw Hats and Wano's warriors handled the defeated enemies. The people of Wano observed from afar, wondering what was happening. The sky was still lit up with lightning and intense attacks of various colors. They watched the battles reflected in the horizon's light, trying to comprehend the events that would shape their land's future. Will they be okay? A woman asked, gazing at the illuminated sky. She hadn't joined the war because her brother, a samurai, hadn't let her go. All she could do was watch, hoping he would keep his promise. Others remembered Luffy's words, hoping he would deliver the victory he had promised. Throughout Wano, many people shared the same thoughts, unaware of the details. The explosions in the sky and the strange laughter, which had begun to echo out of nowhere, could be heard even in the most distant villages on the other side of the country. Everything pointed to an intense battle, with the fight still at its peak. Big brother, Tama whispered, gazing into the distance alongside trusted villagers. Kazuki Sukiyaki hadn't allowed her to go, hoping that Luffy would truly defeat the evil dragon. Meanwhile, at sea, the waves began to stir. Ships appeared on the horizon. A fleet so massive it seemed infinite. They weren't 10, nor 100, but 800 ships advancing, loaded with immense military power. Their sails were white, but they did not belong to the navy. They were from the world government. "We're approaching, sir," murmured one of the men commanding a ship. The captain positioned his den-den-mushi, observing the dark sky illuminated by the distant attacks on the horizon. Wano was just a small point in the distance, but it was the fleet's destination. "We're certain we won't be detected," he said confidently as they continued to advance. "I see. Our Cypher Pol Zero agents have all been eliminated," murmured Saturn on the other end of the line. He had just received the news from the CPS headquarters in Mary Joyce. The vivre cards of the 4 agents sent on the mission had all burned, indicating that the mission might have failed. Saturn furrowed his brow. He still didn't know exactly what was happening in Wano, as there was no longer any contact with the team dispatched. They couldn't even contact a Marine member who had infiltrated the Beast Pirates. The only other potential source of information would have been Drake, but he had already fallen before the battle began. Saturn took a deep breath and issued new instructions. "In any case, keep the transmission open at all times. I want to know everything that's happening in real time," he said. "Yes, sir," a government agent replied. The man aboard the ship turned and looked behind him, seeing a throng of soldiers and government agents. Among them was a peculiar figure with white wings and 2 pacifistas stationed on each ship. This agent had seen much in his service to the government but had never witnessed anything like this before. He knew the government considered these forces their new weapon to fight against the Straw Hats or any other enemy. Swallowing hard, he wondered how the Straw Hats could possibly contend with 800 ships filled with such monstrosities. In the Pangaea Castle chamber, Saturn continued watching the visuals for a few seconds before picking up a communicator. Meanwhile, in the meeting of kings, the world leaders had been debating for hours about the abolition of the 7 warlords of the seas system and other matters. As the discussions progressed, they began to hear about new strategies to deal with pirates and even the Revolutionary Army. At that moment, the den-den-mushi rang in one of the Gorosei's hands. "All troops are in position. It's almost time." Saturn's voice resonated throughout the room. The elder who answered the call looked at the others in the chamber, nodding toward his fellow elders. None of the kings and queens present understood what was happening, gazing in surprise and confusion, but soon they would start receiving transmissions about the event. Meanwhile, farther out than even the Navy's fleet, in a location undetectable to the government, another group of ships was also approaching. "We can't get any closer, Captain. There's an enormous government force ahead," reported a man who seemed to appear out of nowhere as if he had teleported. "Zahahahaha." Blackbeard laughed loudly, staring at the horizon. "Looks like we'll have to wait a bit longer." He anticipated that the Straw Hats would already be exhausted after their fight against Kaido and Big Mom. There was no doubt in his mind that Luffy and his crew would defeat the two Four Emperors. Even so, he was surprised by the sheer strength the government had deployed. "I hope they weaken each other even more," Blackbeard muttered. "It'll be the perfect opportunity to take down the Straw Hat crew at their lowest point. We'll defeat them and steal their devil fruits and powers. And the poneglyphs." Zahahahaha. Blackbeard continued laughing, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Occasional flashes of light could be seen in the distance, marking the direction of Wano. Although the island itself was out of sight from their position, it was clear that the battle there was intense. Blackbeard patiently awaited the right moment to strike. Chapter 475, The Wano War 15. With explosive sounds, the night sky, along with the moon, projected itself over Onigashima, until the entire roof of the island exploded at that moment, devastating the entire area. The ground cracked as dust and debris rose into the air. When the smoke settled across Onigashima's roof, everyone not involved in the fights shielded themselves from it. Explosions echoed in a corner while Luffy and Bullet kept fighting without paying attention to the changing scenery. In the midst of the dust cloud, they moved at high speed. The cause of the earlier explosion was Kaido, who had been trying to hit Lucy. As the smoke began to recede, Lucy started laughing again. Her laughter echoed throughout the area as she emerged with her entire body darkened, only to return to normal after spinning her body once more. As they say, she possessed the most absurd power in the world, and everyone watching this fight had stunned faces. "This is so much fun!" she exclaimed, laughing uncontrollably with excitement. Luffy and Bullet kept fighting. Kaido, in the sky, looked toward where Lucy was laughing, sensing something heading his way. Suddenly, a giant hand emerged from the smoke caused by the explosion and grabbed him, pulling him down forcefully. Stunned, Kaido couldn't react in time, letting out a loud cry as he was dragged downward. The smoke began to dissipate with the wind caused by the sheer force of Kaido's descent. Lucy made him spin, allowing everyone to see what she was doing. She hurled him forward, slamming him against the ground repeatedly from side to side. Even in his dragon form, Kaido couldn't break free. Lucy's body appeared more muscular, and her strength was astounding. Another massive explosion occurred when Kaido tried to rise. The impact cracked the ground as he was thrown a distance away, still trying to recover. "Hey, I don't think we'll be able to keep fighting here. This place is too small," Luffy said, dodging a punch from Bullet. "You should focus on our fight," replied Bullet, absorbing rocks from the ground. However, he didn't seem to care about Luffy's words and continued exchanging punches fiercely. Luffy, thinking about what to do, since their fight might destroy all of Onigashima due to Bullet's power, started steering their clash in a particular direction. Flames began erupting from his arm as it collided with Bullet's colossal fist of rocks. Bullet was surprised by Luffy's increasing strength, as the tide of the battle began to turn in Luffy's favor. "Flaming Comet Punch!" Luffy exclaimed. The next moment, the entire area started to explode. Space seemed to distort as uncontrolled flames erupted everywhere. Bullet barely had time to react before feeling his rock fist being obliterated. The area detonated in a massive burst of flames, launching him out of Onigashima like a meteor. Everyone shielded their eyes from the intense explosion, watching in shock. Bullet spat blood as he collided with the ground moments later. "I felt that," he murmured, trying to halt the impact. Finally, he slowed down and stood upright, though weakened. As the smoke cleared, he looked around, checking his surroundings. Bullet couldn't even see Onigashima's skull in the distance. Instead, he saw icy peaks near him and a much larger peak farther away. He realized he was in Wano. "That brat sent me here," he muttered before noticing flames exploding in the air and rapidly rising. Moments later, he advanced with full force. Luffy, now in his hybrid form with wings, descended like a meteor toward the area, causing it to explode once more. They were in the Ringo region, and people across the entire island watched as a line of flames surged toward that part of the island. The fiery line, like a meteor on the horizon, devastated the entire area, with light erupting in the distance. Everyone wondered what was happening, especially with the second explosion appearing on the horizon as Luffy headed toward Bullet. Suddenly, everything turned purple, lighting up the dark sky. When the light returned to normal, worried voices from the non-combatant inhabitants were heard. "Hey, are they fighting here? Who's causing this? Is it Kaido?" someone quickly asked, standing up to observe the situation. Meanwhile, the fight between Luffy and Bullet continued. They exchanged fierce punches, colliding underground as the fight raged on, causing the entire area to explode as their supersonic blows connected. Then, at one point, Bullet found an opening and punched Luffy, sending him flying out of the area. Luffy collided with one of the icy mountains near the cemetery, causing part of the terrain to crumble and a section of the peak to fall. That guy's got a hell of a hook. Luffy murmured, spitting out some blood as he stood in the destroyed area. He looked ahead, surprised, raising an eyebrow as he saw the entire region beginning to darken. I was afraid he'd do this in Onigashima. That's why I brought him here. I'm glad it didn't happen there, since he can't absorb all of Wano. It's too big. But he's definitely going to take one of the regions for himself, Luffy muttered, keeping a close eye on Bullet's actions. Bullet began using his full power. He started absorbing everything around him, except the cemetery. The entire surrounding area was drained, and his body began growing to a colossal size. He reached 100 meters, then 200, 300, 400, 500 meters. Until he reached an astounding 1,000 meters tall. He was so massive that people from distant regions began noticing the creature appearing on the horizon. Despite the distance, Bullet's colossal size was evident. I don't remember him being this tall. Luffy murmured, surprised to see Bullet standing 1,000 meters tall. He was gigantic, far larger than depicted in the original story. The people in Ringo quickly began running, trying to escape the destruction and the massive colossus resembling a mountain. The war had invaded their lands. A giant monster was taking shape before them. So be it. Luffy murmured before taking a deep breath. He leaped from the high ground as Bullet towered over him. Even hundreds of meters in the air, as he descended toward the ground, his body began to ignite. In the next moment, he exploded into flames. Bullet turned his face downward, staring at Luffy, who hit the ground in his 50-meter-tall Ifrit form, surrounded by a fiery explosion. Luffy roared, advancing to face Bullet. Their final battle began there. Despite being 20 times smaller than Bullet, Luffy wasn't intimidated. He began unleashing the power of his More Fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, exponentially increasing his size. His current level allowed him to grow up to 20 times larger. Ifrit began to grow and grow, surprising even Bullet. He, too, became a fiery monster the size of a mountain. The people watched, shocked, as another colossal creature emerged. Until Ifrit reached Bullet's size, standing at an impressive 1,000 meters tall. Who was that? Why are there monsters here? Someone asked, staring in fear. Back in Onigashima, the events in Wano were also noticed after Luffy launched Bullet like a meteor off the roof and followed him before anyone could react. Luffy. Yamato murmured, looking toward Wano. A glow appeared on the horizon, and from that distance, it was possible to see the massive figures, leaving everyone there stunned by their size. How big must they be to be visible from here? Lami asked, still incredulous. So this is the true size of that demon? Ono murmured, watching with interest. At the same time, as they witnessed the enormous figures, Kaido's battle also intensified. At that moment, Lucy appeared from the sky. After her fight escalated back into the heights, her massive body emerged from the clouds. She laughed as she struck Kaido square inches the face. He was caught off guard by the impact, being hurled against Onigashima's roof. Hey, what are we going to do now that the fights are over, except for that one out there? One of the samurai asked the members of the Straw Hats. Quick, restrain everyone and keep them under control, without any fatalities, said Usopp to the samurai. What is he planning? Sparing them? Another asked, suspicious. Yes, we have some plans for these people, so they shouldn't be harmed. Usopp explained seriously. No one argued further. After all, the Straw Hats had led the fight and claimed victory. The samurai decided to let them handle things their way. Amazing. We've already won the fight, exclaimed Bartolomeo, excited, stars in his eyes. He began taking photos of the defeated enemies. What are you doing, Bartolomeo? Asked Perona. I'm keeping a record. I'm going to make several murals. This will be incredible. Bartolomeo replied enthusiastically, while everyone sighed, watching him photograph all the enemies. Suddenly, Onigashima began to tremble. Hey, shouldn't we go outside to check how the fights are going? Asked Yuta. Of course, let's go. Reiju responded as she began to leave the area. The others decided to follow. Several members of the Straw Hats, along with Boa Hancock and various fleet captains, also moved toward the roof after an opening was created by one of Lucy's attacks. As they entered the area, Lucy was still battling Kaido, with Yamato, Zoro, and Lami watching from the side. Lucy moved rapidly across the island, using her elastic arms and even the ground itself to propel her forward. She and Kaido exchanged intense attacks, generating shockwaves and explosions of haki. The fight was both spectacular and fierce. Kaido, in his hybrid form, struggled to keep up with Lucy's frantic pace. Luffy was overpowering him as he began taking a beating. After all, Luffy was incredibly versatile in addition to her powers. She had mastered all the 6 best combat styles in the world and all levels of advanced haki even before leaving Skypiea. Kaido was feeling the immense power of his opponent as he struggled to escape the pressure the girl, with her absurd abilities, was exerting on him. At that moment, Bonnie also climbed up to watch the fight, her eyes widening in astonishment as she saw Lucy laughing, her eyes shining with a dazzling light. Eno was in the sky, calmly observing the fight on Onigashima, while on the horizon, Luffy and Bullet clashed. The impact of their blows caused massive explosions that lit up all of Wano. Their colossal fists collided with waves of haki, shaking everything around them. Chapter 476, The Wano War 16. Then it is time to begin. One of the Gorosei said as the others nodded in agreement. Yes. With that, they all decided to proceed with the plan. All the kings watched with curiosity, wondering what they were talking about, as the Gorosei picked up a den mushi and began pointing it toward an area in front of the tables where everyone could see. What is this, Gorosei-sama? One of the kings asked, while the others looked around, wondering what was happening. Makino, Kaya, Genzo, and many others had their eyes fixed directly on the projection, which was being turned on, though they still didn't know exactly what was about to happen. Then, the image started to appear, revealing a location in the middle of the sea under the night sky. What place is this? One of the kings cautiously inquired. The sky then began to light up as explosions echoed, and a laughter rang out across the heavens. Ha 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 ha. The laughter made all the elders grimace, wondering whose voice it was. We should have killed her when she was sent to Impel Down before the Maniford War. St. Marcus Mars commented. Too late to bring that up. But we still have this counterattack. This threat will be eliminated along with her brother. We've invested a lot of time and resources into this attack, and it's time to see the results. Saint Shepherd Jupiter added. The other elders nodded, saying no more as they turned their attention to the kings and nobles, who were looking at them with questioning expressions. We are showing you Wano. Saint Ethanbur and Venus Jiro explained. What? The place where the war between the 4 emperors is happening? Is that why you said we would discuss this later? Exclaimed a king from one of the blues, evidently aware of the conflict involving the Straw Hats against Big Mom and Kaido. Yes. We postponed this discussion because we wanted to show you something. After all, with the end of the 7 Warlords of the Seas program, we are theoretically weakening the government's power. They began to speak, leaving everyone in the room with varied expressions. What do you mean? Are you saying there's something to replace them? Another king asked. Yes. We have been developing a program with Vegapunk's help for over 5 years, though we had to accelerate it within the last year. It was originally supposed to be ready 3 years from now, but due to the urgency, we are introducing this operation to you tonight. Saint Topman Warcurry said. And what is it? Queen Kaya asked, her tone filled with concern. We have a weapon unlike anything we've ever created before. We call it the Android Programs, Seraphim and Pacifista V2. Saint Marcus Mars revealed. What are these programs? The question came quickly as everyone was stunned by the revelation of these new government weapons. The Pacifistas have received an upgrade to their systems. After collecting data during our attack on the Straw Hats over 2 months ago, we incorporated their combat styles and powers into the system, allowing us to counter them much more effectively than we have in the past. Saint Shepherd Jupiter said, pausing briefly. The Seraphim are clones of the former 7 Warlords of the Seas. Since we possess their genetic data, we have even replicated their devil fruit powers and created multiple clones of them. Saint Shepherd Jupiter continued, as the room grew increasingly shocked by the implications of his words. The androids were the last to be developed. They are a force of cypherpol agents, all modified to use top-tier techniques and equipped with all the data we've embedded in the Pacifistas. They also have special abilities to predict attacks, making them far more efficient than the Pacifistas. He added. How many of these things are we talking about? Genzo asked, swallowing hard as he imagined the kind of power they were discussing. Nami and Nojiko could be in danger. We dispatched 1,000 ships, but only 800 are heading to Wano. Each ship carries 2 Pacifistas, meaning 1,600 Pacifistas are on their way to Wano, along with 100 Seraphim and 200 androids. He said, as the entire room seemed to gulp in unison. This was an absurd number, far greater than what was used in the war, and the Gorosei were well aware of it. This was a power greater than the entire Navy, but due to the weakening of the organization and the loss in the last war, the world government decided to spend more resources than ever in its history. They had strengthened themselves to the point of no longer needing to rely on the Navy, After all, they now had soldiers who would follow their orders without question. Nothing in the world could defy them. A force like this could destroy an entire blue. Someone murmured, as everyone seemed quite terrified upon hearing such a thing. Yes. But it is a necessary force to eliminate all the threats in this world. We have allowed the pirates to do as they please ever since the rise of the former pirate king. We can no longer tolerate such forces emerging at sea. It's time to prove the power of the world government. One of them said in a somber tone. So you plan to eliminate the 3-4 emperors at this moment? Someone asked. Not yet. As you can see, their battle is happening as we speak. Although we don't know exactly what is going on there, we are waiting for things to settle. We are waiting for them to be at their weakest to strike. The Gorosei explained. I see. That sounds very promising. The kings did not hesitate to declare their sovereignty, eager to see these monsters of the sea finally eliminated. Although some in the room looked on with worried and somber expressions, most viewed the 4 emperors as a scourge, and the majority seemed excited by the government's demonstration. However, a few knew they disliked the government's power, especially now that it was too overwhelming to be trusted in their hands. Today, it was the pirates, tomorrow, it could be them. We look forward to seeing this, said one queen, smiling broadly as she watched the screen, which still displayed the night sky illuminated by flashes of attacks on the horizon. Wait, you said you sent 1,000 ships, but only 800 went to Wano. What happened to the other 200? Queen Makino asked cautiously, directing her question to the elders. We were just about to address that. Well, activate the second screen. One of the 4 said seriously. He gestured, signaling for another display to be turned on. Some staff quickly set up the Den Mushi and complied with the request. Soon, a second screen lit up on the wall, showing another location. But everyone could tell it was the same night sky in the new world. Is that? Someone murmured, recognizing Dressrosa alongside other islands in the foreground. Yes, we will launch another attack on Dressrosa, along with other kingdoms that have declared themselves no longer affiliated with the world government. One of the elders explained. Therefore, we will deal with them as well. After all, they are part of the pirate group. The firm tone left everyone a bit surprised. In addition to targeting pirates, the world government would retaliate against kingdoms that were no longer part of its fold. Although the Fishman Island and the Kingdom of Alabasta, which had also refused to attend the reverie, were not mentioned explicitly, the primary target was clearly the territory under the Straw Hat flag in the New World. Do you intend to destroy Dressrosa? Someone asked, concerned. It was evident no one wanted to see a kingdom destroyed simply for declaring independence. We do not intend to destroy them, if that's what you're worried about. One of the Gorosei replied coldly. But we will eliminate all pirates under the Straw Hat flag, along with the royal family, as traitors. We will take over the kingdom and appoint a new king to rule. At that moment, the screen showed another impressive fleet of over 200 ships advancing toward the cluster of islands that Luffy had claimed as his territory, with Bippo using the power of the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit to keep them afloat. You intend to attack Dressrosa at this moment? Someone asked the leader, as the ships continued to advance at full speed toward Dressrosa. Yes. We have no reason to delay. After all, their greatest forces are in Wano. Saint Topman Warcurry responded firmly. Picking up a Den Mushi, he issued the command, commence the attack. Saint Topman Warcurry gave the order without hesitation. Yes, sir. A voice responded from the other side of the line. Quickly, the attack began. While Dressrosa, along with all the islands under the Straw Hat flag, seemed to be their primary target, on the second screen, which was still active, intense flashes suddenly started to appear. An explosive sound filled the air as the night sky turned yellow, illuminated by a clash of hockey greater than any before. The kings were awestruck by the sight, but the Gorosei narrowed their eyes at the unfolding situation. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, what is happening? Saint Shepherd Jupiter Monty asked. Saturn, who was still hidden in another room, responded, it seems the final clash has begun. But there are 2 of them happening. It could be Big Mom and Kaido against the Straw Hats. We're not entirely sure. I see. Very well, prepare for battle. Jupiter replied. All the troops aboard the ships shown on the screen began to mobilize. For the first time, the Seraphim, androids, pacifistas, and even some other individuals appeared on the scene. They were unfamiliar to anyone, drawing more questioning glances. These are the Holy Knights, the elite force of the world government. As you can see, we will not accept any outcome other than the destruction of the Straw Hats and the other pirates. We will eliminate, once and for all, this scourge that haunts the world. Someone declared firmly. If they continue advancing through the new world, a global war could erupt. But this world government is committed to maintaining order, peace, and, with that, We will eliminate all those who stand in our way. The speaker continued, directing their gaze at the kings and queens present. It was as if a direct message was being delivered to them as well: dare to defy us and see what will happen to you. The kings and queens exchanged tense glances as they watched the two screens. One displayed the attack on Dressrosa already underway, while the other revealed preparations for another battle. Everything pointed to the final fight between Luffy and the two Four Emperors soon nearing its conclusion. The world government was finally asserting its sovereignty. The five elders had been planning this for over a year. All the intelligence they had gathered and the resources they had expended culminated in this day. At last, they had the chance to eliminate the world government's most significant targets. Both the second coming of Joy Boy, confirmed through the broadcast, and Monkey D. Luffy, who had become uncontrollable and extraordinarily powerful, would be eradicated. Everything would end tonight, and they were putting all their chips on this moment. Chapter 477, The Wano War 17. Bullet, in his 1,000-meter form, with a completely dark appearance, stared at the creature before him. He couldn't help but smile as he watched the battle unfold. When he had to measure his strength against an opponent, it was astonishing to find someone who also possessed a gigantic form like his, allowing for a true battle. Meanwhile, the entire crowd closest to the area was running away in desperation, trying to get as far as possible from those monsters. Bullet stared at Luffy, and Luffy stared at Bullet. Both had an intense gleam in their eyes. They longed for this battle. They were excited about the clash happening before them. In the next moment, the two giants touched the ground and charged at each other. Both then raised their fists, and in that instant, silence took over the environment as they approached the next clash, both wielding Conqueror's Haki. The impact of their blows was so overwhelming that, for a brief fraction of a second, the sound completely dissipated. During this short period, everything seemed calm, as if the war had never occurred, as if Wano was at peace like it hadn't been in the last 20 years. But this illusion lasted only a moment. The sound of the collision exploded through the air, and in the next instant, all of Wano shone with the force of the impact. The shockwaves spread in all directions. The inhabitants of the region saw the flash on the horizon as two colossal creatures clashed with their giant fists, their Haki lightning bolts even reaching Onigashima. Luffy's companions quickly shifted their attention from Luffy's battle against Do and looked toward Wano in shock. It looked like a sun in the middle of the night, illuminating the entire place with an eerie intensity. While everyone reacted to the scene and the people of Wano continued to flee, even from distant regions to reach the farthest point of the island, Luffy and Bullet continued their fierce struggle. Luffy's fist began to generate purple flames. "He's beating me." Bullet felt the impact and couldn't help but murmur, feeling his own body weaken. His arm began to be consumed by the flames of chaos, whose effect was the destruction of matter, with his Haki beginning to lose to his opponents. This gave Luffy an immediate advantage. He advanced without hesitation, destroying his opponent's arm. Bullet lost his balance, and as he staggered, he created enormous cracks in the ground with his feet. The shattered stones from his arm fell like meteors, hitting the terrain with brutality. But fortunately, at that moment, there was no one there to be struck by the debris. Still being pushed back, Bullet looked at Luffy, unable to react in time. Without hesitation, Luffy punched his chin with all his strength. The blow was devastating. The giant creature fell even further back before collapsing, exploding the ground with a weight equivalent to that of a mountain. Still trying to recover, Luffy wouldn't let Bullet have an easy time and quickly raised his giant leg, attempting to stomp on Bullet with full force. However, before the strike could land, Bullet's body began to transform. His dark form dissipated, and before Luffy could even touch the ground with his foot, Bullet was already moving away, his massive body retreating. In the next instant, Bullet rose several kilometers, now back to his normal form, having even reconstructed his lost arm. He did not hesitate and charged at Luffy again with his restored fist, catching Luffy in an opening. Luffy crossed his arms to defend himself, receiving the punch from his opponent and being launched across the ground but still managing to stay firm. He continued trying to stop Bullet's attack as the ground beneath him cracked into two enormous chasms, until he finally managed to halt the assault. Bullet did not give up and pulled his fist back, preparing for another attack, launching it forward with the intent to finish Luffy off. But this time, instead of blocking, Luffy simply dodged with a quick movement of his head. Seizing the moment when Bullet struck nothing but air, Luffy grabbed his opponent's arm, spun him over his shoulder, and brutally slammed him backward into the ground. Anemaru, who was guarding the cemetery as always, watched in terror as all the smoke and debris spread across the regions. Those gigantic creatures could destroy the entire area with this kind of battle. Luffy still held Bullet's arm tightly while opening his mouth and beginning to generate flames. He spat them directly at his opponent, illuminating him and causing the flames to explode around him. At that moment, he felt his adversary's arms start to soften as the matter distorted, returning to its original state before re-emerging in the middle of the flames as a new colossus. "This guy is persistent," Luffy murmured, looking at him seriously. Bullet took a few steps back before leaping several kilometers, gaining distance to change his strategy against Luffy. Then, he grabbed some stones from the ground and hurled them. Luffy saw this and quickly raised his hand. As soon as the stones left the giant's hands, launched like modern missiles, they were propelled forward and disappeared into the air. Luffy generated flames to counter them, raising his palm forward and rapidly firing fireballs one after another, exploding most of the rocks in midair. But many others still advanced in all directions. Seeing that some of them would hit other regions, he quickly placed his body in front of some while others passed around him, unable to stop them all. Frustrated by this, Bullet continued throwing stones without caring about the consequences. He did not originally intend to hit others, but he was certainly getting carried away by the battle, ignoring the collateral damage. As explosions erupted in various regions of Wano, debris struck houses, destroying multiple city structures and other places. People screamed in despair, not understanding what was happening. Some running to save their lives, others at risk of being crushed by the rubble. "This bastard," Luffy murmured, looking at Bullet, who was already picking up more stones. He then looked at a large cliff in Wano, flexed his feet, and shot off at high speed toward it, leaping over all of Wano while his body gleamed with the flames he emitted. The inhabitants of Wano saw the creature of purple flame sliding through the air. Upon reaching the cliff, Luffy grabbed onto the rock, spun his body in midair, and repositioned himself, once again facing his enemy. The other 1,000-meter-tall creature that remained in the Ringo region. Luffy held onto the cliff, watching Bullet prepare another attack. More stones were launched. Luffy raised his arm again and started generating flames, firing at the projectiles like a machine gun with a single hand. The stones he couldn't destroy were hurled upward, completely leaving Wano due to his high position when Bullet aimed at him, preventing them from threatening the regions below. The clash of stones against flames intensified, witnessed by all. Many stared at the colossal creature atop the capital, swallowing hard, trying to comprehend exactly what that thing was. Then, Luffy saw an opening as Bullet grabbed another batch of stones from the ground. He flexed his feet and gripped the cliff, preparing to launch himself with a push. Then, he shot forward, charging at Bullet at full speed. He looked like a meteor in the sky, illuminating Wano once more. Raising both hands forward while his body was already engulfed within the line of flames, Luffy began generating a gigantic fireball in front of him, increasing its size as he advanced. Every stone that came his way was consumed by the fire after Bullet attempted to stop him. Bullet saw this and halted his attacks, realizing they would remain useless. He started concentrating his haki into his hand, preparing for a final strike. Both were ready for the ultimate clash. Luffy's flames grew even larger, as massive as his own body, spanning 1,000 meters in diameter. To all who watched, it seemed as though a purple sun had appeared in the sky of Wano. But just as Bullet was about to strike him, Luffy suddenly shrank in size, reducing himself 20 times until he returned to his original form. This caused his fireball to shrink as well, reverting to a proportional size of 50 meters in diameter. This sudden change made Bullet miss his strike, his eyes widening as he realized the danger. Luffy landed on the ground, creating a quick explosion before shooting upward, charging directly at his opponent's chest while Bullet still had his arm extended forward. Bullet barely had time to react before feeling the impact. The moment Luffy touched his opponent's chest, the fireball became even more intense. He used his speed multiplication, combined with a 1-second command into the future, before also increasing his mass. Bullet felt his body being pushed back with 100 times the force of the attack. Before he could react, he was being launched at high speed into the sky. Even with his enormous body, he continued being propelled higher and higher. He ascended, rising further and further. And within moments, he was already more than 20,000 meters in the air. Luffy looked on, satisfied, from the ground in Wano, watching the result of his attack. Then, in the next moment, the second command was executed after 1 second. The fireball suddenly began to grow, catching Bullet completely off guard. What? Bullet tried to react, but it was already too late. His body began to disintegrate as the sphere of fire expanded. Luffy had increased his size 100 times, transforming his 50-meter fireball into an astonishing 5-kilometer-wide inferno. No one there could have predicted such destructive power. And then, a colossal fireball appeared in the sky, with Bullet still being carried by it. His body could no longer resist. The fireball, now 5 times larger than he was, kept ascending. At 30,000 meters in altitude, an intense light took over the sky. In the next instant, the explosion occurred. The flash engulfed all of Wano, illuminating the sky like never before in history. Even in Mary Jo's, where the elders were watching the battle through a broadcast with the kings, They were all stunned upon seeing the flash. But what shocked them even more was that the light wasn't coming only from the broadcast. They looked out the window and saw the glow of the impact on the real horizon. This came from there? One of the elders murmured, incredulous. The flash remained for several seconds, burning the skies with an overwhelming purple radiance. And then, the sound came. The explosion echoed, and soon, a devastating shockwave swept through everything around. They could see the night clouds simply being pushed away. The windows of Pangaea Castle shattered completely, and the guards along with the kings and queens screamed, startled by the impact. Just like all of Mary Joy's. The explosion was so intense that the entire New World felt its effects. Strong winds shook the islands. The sea turned like never before. For several minutes, the entire New World was covered in an unreal purple glow. It was as if a sun had appeared, but at the same time, it was purple. Even in the blues, like North Blue and West Blue, the glow from Luffy's attack was visible in the sky. Everyone there could witness one of the most terrifying abilities of the one considered to be one of the most powerful pirates in the world. As he demonstrated one of his mass destruction attacks, causing devastation across all regions. Chapter 478, The Wano War 18. The explosion had already affected almost all the islands of the New World while the sky continued to glow with an intense purple hue. However, if Mary Joy's was affected that way from thousands of kilometers away, Wano was the area that should have taken the most impact. Because if it saw the impact of the explosion coming, with a blinding glow that would blind everyone there, and immediately jumped into the sky while crossing his arms and positioning his wings forward in a defensive stance. Then, he created a purple flame barrier like a shield and quickly increased its size with the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit. The shockwave impact arrived the next moment, while Luffy felt his body being thrown backward as soon as the barrier was affected, trying to penetrate it. No. With that, Luffy, in his Ifrit form, gritted his teeth while forcing his body forward, not letting the force penetrate his shield made of his own flames, protecting the entire Wano area. If it failed, the entire country would be devastated, even its mountain would be destroyed. Everyone in Wano looked at the thin flame barrier protecting them while the island trembled because of it. The sky was completely purple, with the explosion still happening above. In Onigashima, everyone stopped to look at the scene, their eyes wide and mouths slightly agape, speechless. Even the most powerful members present watched in shock. Zoro, Lamy, Yamato, Reiju, Hancock, Kaido, and all the others, no one had ever seen such power before. The only thing preventing Onigashima from vanishing with the wave was Luffy's barrier, as the entire sea surrounding Wano was in turmoil, looking like the end of the world outside the shield. Lucy, in her Nika form, looked at it, her eyes popping out of her face in a comical expression. Luffy? She exclaimed, staring at her brother's power. Meanwhile, outside Onigashima, the 800 government ships were all affected, their fate unknown as the shockwave rushed toward them. Even Blackbeard, despite his confidence, when he saw the explosion appear on the horizon, turning the New World's night into day, simply widened his eyes as a tsunami came for them along with the shockwave. Captain. His crew members immediately swallowed hard upon seeing that. The wave spread while Saturn, who was still watching the transmission in a hidden room, remained with the other Gorosei in another chamber along with the kings and queens. He saw the explosion and immediately opened his eyes wide as everything exploded in pink light, momentarily blinding him. It deeply unsettled him. After all, he had spent months surrounded by purple flames when he was trapped in that comet flying through the planet's orbit. The only thing he had seen back then was the flames consuming his body to the point of never fully recovering, even with his special healing abilities. He had only survived due to his unique condition, and Imu-sama had rescued him from it. He barely had time to react as the sea simply exploded, and the filming camera cut off the transmission. The next moment, the sky lit up while Saturn looked in that direction before the windows shattered from the force of the impact, forcing his eyes open. What is this? His eyes widened at such power. The kings in the other room were all stunned, their screams of fear and surprise filling the air as they raised their hands to shield themselves from the glass shards. The Gorosei watched attentively for a while as things finally started to calm down, though the explosion was still visible. Who did this to my home? Look at the sky. What is happening? Who dares to ruin my windows? Slaves, clean this up. Who interrupted my dear dinner? The Tenri Obitos were all in a bad mood in the city, stepping out of their homes, looking up at the sky, exclaiming and cursing. However, the most furious were those who had been injured, appearing with their helmets destroyed while their bodies bled. I will kill whoever did this to me. Who caused that explosion? Hurry, agents. Find out who did this. The screams continued for a while as all the government men tried to calm them down or search for answers. This is the current power of the Straw Hat Captain? One of the elders murmured, watching carefully. I. Another was about to speak, but a voice resonated throughout Mary Jo eyes, silencing them and everyone else. WHODID this. The voice of Amu, immediately heard, alerted all who knew of him, while the kings and queens felt a chill without even knowing to whom that authoritative tone belonged. We must leave immediately. Stay here. The Grossi immediately ordered the allied kingdom rulers to remain before they vanished, advancing toward the empty throne without further explanation. The being who was the true ruler of the world was furious. Luffy. Makino murmured, looking at the light in the sky, which was finally beginning to fade. Kobe stood atop one of the 10 Ryobito houses, speechless as he gazed at the explosion. Luffy. Garp muttered as he stared at the ball of flames. There was no doubt. This was an even greater power than the punch he had once clashed with his grandson. But his gaze shifted away from the massive ball of purple fire and back toward the castle, his eyes narrowing. That voice. He murmured darkly. Elsewhere in the new world, the sky shone as bright as the sun itself as many stared at the purple explosion, their expressions filled with astonishment. Shanks, what is that? Lucky Roo exclaimed, looking at the sky, while the rest of the crew gathered, their gazes equally stunned. Could that be? Ben Beckman glanced at Shanks with a hint of concern, but Shanks only watched the light with a serious expression. It's Luffy. He murmured, his gaze unwavering. The minks who had stayed behind looked on in surprise, trying to shield themselves from the shockwave while Zunsha kept walking, gazing in that direction. The drums of liberation are still playing there. What is happening? Without knowing exactly what was transpiring in Wano, he wondered, as no one had spoken to him. In Dressrosa, Gloriosa stood on the balcony with Luffy's children when the sky suddenly lit up. What? She exclaimed before sensing what was coming next. Children, take cover. She shouted as they all stared at the flames in the sky. The next moment, the shock wave arrived, and she swiftly protected all the children from the flying glass with her staff, while their wide eyes reflected the spectacle before them. She finally let out a breath of relief, checking to see that no one was hurt. It was at that moment that Rayleigh suddenly appeared, quickly assessing the situation. I see that you and the kids are safe. He remarked with a sigh of relief as well. Yes. But now. Can you tell me what the hell is happening? She exclaimed, still stunned. Rayleigh stepped aside and looked up at the illuminated sky as the light began to fade. It's Luffy, somehow. He murmured. You're saying this is coming from Wano? Do you not realize how insane that sounds? She shouted. Daddy. Did Daddy do this? One of Hancock's daughters murmured. Rayleigh didn't answer the girl and turned his attention back to Gloriosa. Listen. Government forces are coming here. We need to prepare for battle. I want you to protect them. Some other people will be here to guard them during the conflict. We will be on the front lines. He spoke before disappearing. Gloriosa nodded, turning back to the children, answering their questions as they watched the sky slowly return to normal. At the center of all the chaos, there were finally signs that the explosion was coming to an end. The shock wave had finally diminished until it completely disappeared. At last, Luffy began to retract his flame shield as it started to fade away, while the sky gradually calmed again, returning to its dark color with stars shining in a clear, cloudless night. Little by little, everything was returning to normal. Seeing this, Luffy began to fall toward the ground, while the earth around him still trembled, his body landing in the middle of a completely devastated area. Where Bullet had once stood. Luffy remained silent for a moment as his Ifrit transformation faded, returning to his normal human form. He gazed up at the sky, which appeared somewhat distorted due to the intense temperature variations caused by his flames. Did this affect other islands? Luffy murmured. He knew very well. His attack had been too devastating. But, in the end, it was enough to defeat his enemy. He had no intention of killing him, but he had been forced to use that technique. He doubted Bullet had survived. His body was likely completely disintegrated by the effect of his chaos flames. Well, there's nothing to do about it now. He murmured, turning his attention toward all of Wano and sensing with his haki the damage the battle had caused. People were still running in fear. Even though they no longer saw any giant beasts, they couldn't be sure if they were truly gone. Or if another explosion might suddenly occur and destroy everything. They remained terrified at the mere possibility. Luffy let out a sigh. His gaze shifted back to Onigashima before flexing his knees and launching himself into the sky using Moonwalk, intending to return to the island and check on the situation with the rest of his companions. Luffy. Lucy couldn't help but cheer upon seeing that her brother had protected the entire country. Then, her gaze fell upon Kdu, who was still in his dragon form. She decided to end this once and for all. Hey, Kdu. Our fight isn't over yet. She suddenly exclaimed as she leaped into the sky above Onigashima. Kdu was still staring in shock at the explosion, but then he looked up and saw a massive hand beginning to form. The sky was clear, as the explosion had swept away all the clouds. Lucy didn't try to hide what she was doing. Her hand grew larger and larger until it reached a size equivalent to Onigashima itself, shocking everyone who witnessed it. Given the situation, Du felt a little lost at that moment. His entire crew had been defeated. He was surrounded by enemies, yet none of them acted against him, they simply watched the fight. That was, until the explosion from Wano had erupted, even drawing his attention. Du had seen part of Luffy and Du's battle and couldn't help but be impressed by it. Now, however, he had to face his own opponent. He would not run. With a serious expression, he unleashed his flames. He might lose here, but at the very least, he would fight to the end. And he would fight head-on, without sneak attacks. After all, that was not his way of battling. Then, he began to generate flames, preparing for his final attack. Chapter 479, The Wano War 19. The last battle remaining was now dedicated to Lucy, who was entering her final clash, finishing her giant Haki-infused fist, while Du began to roar, flames rapidly filling the sky above Onigashima, transforming him into a dragon made entirely of fire, 100 times larger than his own body. Luffy arrived at that moment, landing beside Lamy and looking up with interest. Before he could react, Hancock rushed toward him and hugged him tightly, pressing her breasts against his face. "Luffy!" she exclaimed. "Hancock, calm down," Luffy warned, grabbing her by the waist and gently pulling her away. "Let's first see how Lucy will fare against Du." He checked her over, ignoring the heart-shaped eyes, and confirmed that she was unharmed. Hancock hadn't even been injured, which was a relief. Just like his other comrades, none of them were seriously hurt, only bearing some consequences from their battles. "What was that, Luffy?" Lamy approached, surprised, noticing a distortion in the sky above Onigashima due to the sun he had created. "I had a powerful opponent, and I had to deal with him as such. He was one of the most powerful people in the world from the old generation. Certainly, I had to go a bit overboard," Luffy murmured. As he spoke, his eyes were already fixed on Lucy, who was preparing her strike, while Du rapidly expanded, illuminating the entire sky. "Luffy, tell me." An irritated voice approached him. Bonnie arrived, pointing at the sky, looking at Luffy and staring at the colossal dragon above. "She is Joy Boy, isn't she?" Her voice was tense, almost nervous. Luffy could understand why Bonnie was like this. "Yes. She is the only one who can transform into him, the ancient god manifested through a fruit," Luffy replied. "Nika? That's a god? Wait, are you saying a god manifested through a fruit?" Lamy asked, curious beside him, making Luffy receive many bewildered looks. "Yes. Human fruit model, sun god Nika devil fruit is a false name. The true name of Lucy's fruit is the human fruit model, sun god Nika devil fruit," he revealed, watching his sister, who was pulling back her enormous fist, preparing to strike Du. "A fruit that can transform someone into a god. Should something like that even exist?" Lamy murmured, shocked. "Yes. And I bet she's not the only god who has manifested through a fruit. There must be others, and I don't know much about them," Luffy stated. In the next instant, a bolt of lightning struck beside him, as Enel stared at him with narrowed eyes, emerging from his lightning. He had easily overheard the entire conversation from the sky. "You're saying your sister is a god too?" he asked, grumpily. "Yes. She is. She is the god of the sun, of freedom, and of joy. God Nika," Luffy replied. Du finally prepared his attack, beginning to spin his immense body before advancing. Lucy also launched her colossal fist, advancing swiftly. In the next moment, the two collided in an explosion of conquerors and armament Haki, without even touching directly. The shockwave reverberated, and Du opened his mouth to push back his opponent's fist, while Lucy countered with a colossal punch imbued with Haki. The sky instantly changed color. An intense yellow took over the space as a shockwave spread throughout the region, even shattering the jagged rocks that formed Onigashima's head. Everyone tried to shield themselves from the explosion, while Luffy watched everything with interest. "Come on, Lucy. Win," he commented, cheering for his sister, the wind blowing back his hair, hat, and cape. Although he had initially planned to defeat Du, now he wanted to see Lucy emerge victorious. The clash between their Haki continued, creating a battle of sheer strength and willpower. Various parts of the ceiling began to crack and break apart, while the people below tried to escape the impact of the collision, witnessing the intense light generated by Lucy and Du's battle, able to see through the opening. "Only Du remains," someone exclaimed. "Go, defeat him," another Wano citizen shouted. "Defeat the dragon, please, Straw Hat," some pleaded. Some people couldn't clearly see who was fighting, so they assumed it was Monkey D. Luffy. Despite the strange and gigantic explosion earlier, they couldn't fully understand what was happening, as they were still inside the island. The struggle continued for a while, but finally, someone began to gain the upper hand. Du's body started to explode as if he were being overwhelmed. He barely had time to react when he realized his fire dragon form was being disintegrated. In the next moment, the giant fist advanced against him. He only had time to glimpse the incoming punch for a few milliseconds, his own thoughts racing, and then the impact was devastating. His body collapsed under the full force of Lucy's haki, which penetrated him completely, forcing his defeat. The dragon, already knocked out, was hurled toward Onigashima and into the sea. Luffy, Lamy, Hancock, Enel, Zoro, Budge, and everyone else watching the battle remained silent as Du plummeted rapidly, crashing into the ground with an explosion. The impact took many by surprise, and he continued to sink into the depths. "I'll be right back. Lamy, I need your help over there," Luffy said amid the chaos before disappearing under everyone's watchful gaze. In the middle of the destruction, with no time for reactions, Luffy suddenly appeared, using his speed increased by 200 times. To him, everything seemed to move in slow motion as he continued pulling people to safety from the impact zone. However, he couldn't save everyone alone. Fortunately, he knew that someone would soon take action as well. At that moment, Lamy raised her hand and used her room, expanding her influence across the entire island. Quickly, she began rescuing everyone in the path of the debris caused by Du's fall. A few moments later, Luffy reappeared where he had vanished from. "What was that?" Lamy asked, giving him a suspicious look for going to where Du had fallen. "Just had to take care of something real quick," he replied casually, offering no further details. Before anyone could react, they all looked up and saw Lucy shrinking her hand back to its normal size. She began to fall, but she was laughing non-stop. "Haha. That was so much fun," she exclaimed while still in the air. As she touched the ground, her ability turned the surface into rubber for an instant, allowing her to bounce back up and land softly on the ground. Shortly after, she smiled widely at everyone around her. No one knew exactly how to react to that, but Luffy stepped forward and approached his sister. "You did well, sister," he said with a proud smile. Lucy's smile grew even wider upon hearing that. "You saw that?" She laughed excitedly. "You're Nika," Bonnie shouted, running toward Lucy as well. Lucy made a confused expression. "No. I'm Lucy," she replied simply. After all, she didn't fully understand the essence of her fruit. Luffy smiled. "Well, looks like we're done here. Aren't you tired?" he asked, already anticipating what would happen next. In the next instant, Lucy started losing her transformation. A white vapor escaped from her mouth as her body returned to normal. I'm so tired," was all she murmured before simply falling backward onto the ground and staying there, exhausted. "What? She just collapsed like that?" Bonnie couldn't believe it, and Luffy started laughing. "Ha ha ha. Let her rest for a bit. She's just exhausted," Luffy explained. This was her first time using that power. He looked at his sister with pride. "But very well, sister. You have certainly become very powerful." Lucy, still tired, managed a faint smile before closing her eyes for a moment, satisfied. "You saw, brother? I defeated him," she said with some effort. "Yes, I saw. Now let's inform the others," Luffy replied as he amplified his voice using the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit. "Attention, everyone in Onigashima. Listen. Two of the beasts has just been defeated. All of the beasts pirates and the Big Mom pirates have been completely defeated. There are no more fights or threats." Luffy's voice echoed not only through Onigashima but throughout all of Wano and even beyond. Quickly, an explosion of joyful cheers was heard inside Onigashima. The samurai couldn't believe it. Du's reign over Wano, along with Orochi, had ended. And it had all happened in a single night. Finally, they could be free. Vivi and Nami approached Luffy while Lamy checked on Lucy's condition. Fortunately, she was just exhausted. However, rage couldn't heal her, as her ability consumed the stamina of even the opponent she healed. Less than Marco's fruit, but Lucy's state was already debilitated enough. "Luffy, there are no more threats?" Nami asked, removing Garuda's wings from her back. Luffy turned to her. "I said that so they would hear it too. After all, I want them to come to us. But I don't know what happened to them after the explosion I caused in the sky. After all, the entire sea was disturbed," he responded, reflecting. "Still, I want to let the people of Wano celebrate. This is a victory for them." He took a deep breath before continuing. "As for the government, we'll deal with them as soon as they launch their attack. For now, let's have a few minutes of celebration and rest." Luffy knew that the government would act against him in some way. While they fought, Enel, with his observation haki far more evolved in long-range sensing than anyone else there, had quickly identified the 800 marine warships approaching. This was the force that the government had sent. Luffy had anticipated that the government wouldn't simply let them fight Do and Big Mom without interference, but he was surprised by the force they had deployed. This was far more than a simple buster call. Shifting his gaze away from Nami, Luffy listened to the shouting that echoed through the holes in the castle ceiling. The people of Wano, seeing Do's army defeated, were speechless. At first, they only screamed with emotion. Then, they began crying in relief and happiness. After all, the goal they had dreamed of for the past 20 years had been achieved. "We really won. I can't believe it," said one of the red scabbards, tears in his eyes. "We avenged Odin. Now his soul can rest in peace beside Toki," said another. I can't believe it," Princess Hori murmured, covering her mouth with her hands as tears streamed down her face. Initially, she had placed her trust in her parents' prophecy, but in the end, the prophecy had come true a little earlier than expected. However, it wasn't just that. The fear and panic that had gripped Wano due to the explosions and the battle between Ifrit and the Colossus Bullet had vanished. Now, smiles replaced the frightened faces. The screams of fear were replaced by cheers of celebration. The entire country erupted in festivities. Wano was finally free. They would never again have to live under the shadow of the Beast's pirates. Chapter 480, Post-War Banquet 01. The celebration continued for a while as people rejoiced on all sides. "We won then. We freed Wano, brother," Lucy, hearing the celebrations, said while still being treated by Lamy, flashing a smile at Luffy with his group gathered around. "Yes, Lucy. We showed our strength and secured our position on the seas. No one can doubt anymore that we have become the most powerful pirates in the world at this moment." Luffy said that naturally. No one could challenge them now, having just emerged from a war against 2 Four Emperors groups and fighting against 3 beings of the same level. Yamato defeated Big Mom, Lucy defeated Kaido, and Luffy defeated Bullet. That last fight had been unexpected, and Luffy hadn't even wanted to kill him, but he had no choice. He still had some plans, besides truly wanting to fight that legendary figure, and that left him quite satisfied. That's why he challenged him in Impel Down and wanted to fight him a year later in the New World when he invaded the prison in search of his sister. Finally, Yamato stood in a corner, her eyes opening as a smile appeared on her face. She had finally achieved her dream and goal of freeing Wano. She had nurtured that goal since childhood, ever since reading Odin's journal, assuming a version of Odin within herself. Even though it was a bit immature of her to claim to be Odin, she still had the burning desire to make Wano shine and open its borders. And now, everything was leading to that. She stood admiring the landscape from afar, observing the darkness around while Luffy's flames still burned in the region of Ringo, illuminating all of Wano up to Onigashima as marks of the battle between Luffy and Bullet. "So, should we wait for the next fight to begin, Demon?" Enel said to Luffy, as everyone started gathering around them. Luffy turned to him with a small smile. "Well, let's wait for now. After all, a new challenge is approaching. We haven't lost any of our main members, but even so, many were injured, and we lost a few thousand soldiers, even though we achieved a crushing victory against our enemies." Luffy responded, bringing a finger to his chin in a thoughtful gesture. "Reijo, I want you to heal as many as you can with your flames. Lamy, transfer everyone here along with Chopper so he can begin the treatment," Luffy ordered, while Lamy teleported Reijo to the devastated battlefields, and those she couldn't save would be transferred to the roof of Onigashima. "I also want you to bring all the defeated pirates who aren't dead and bring them here. I need Cavendish to restrain them all, and I need the user of the storage no me," Luffy said as Lamy finished treating Lucy, using her powers to teleport all the defeated pirates except for a few. Quickly, the place filled with bodies in a separate area from the allies. Cavendish was surprised to be there. "Put these sea stone cuffs on all the devil fruit users, and regular cuffs on those who aren't, but reinforce them with stronger restraints for the major devil fruit users," Luffy instructed, pulling a bundle of small objects from his pocket and tossing them, instantly transforming them into an entire mountain of all kinds of cuffs. Cavendish just nodded, and the next moment, his appearance began to change, a grin spreading across his face, causing some around him to react with slight grimaces. Not that they hadn't seen this before, but it was always a bit bizarre for those watching. In the next moment, he started running rapidly among the restrained and unconscious bodies, beginning to wrap them in all sorts of chains and cuffs. "Lord Luffy, do you want me to store everything?" asked a member of Bartolomeo's crew who had the storage fruit. "That's right. Everyone being cuffed should be placed in a separate space until I say otherwise. I'm sure you have room for all of them, right?" Luffy asked while the transformed Cavendish was already securing thousands of them in a short time, though it would still take a while to finish. "Yes, Lord Luffy," he said, nodding and beginning to do exactly that. They continued as more and more people started emerging from the hole in the ceiling created by Lucy while fighting Kaido, and her main crew members also joined them. "We're done here, Luffy. But we have to deal with them," Usopp said, placing a massive magnifying glass over his eye, looking more than 10 kilometers away. "I'll take care of the wounded," Chopper shouted, running towards those Rage who couldn't heal with the Phoenix Flames, quickly beginning to wrap them in bandages. "Yes. Well, does anyone want some loot while we're at it?" Luffy asked, pulling out some barrels from his personal stash. "Of course, Captain." Zoro immediately stepped forward. "Hey, you're already drinking?" Kuina approached them at that moment as well. "You say that as if you're actually surprised by it," Yuta commented, walking towards them with a smile, while her two tails swayed behind her. "Luffy-sama." At that moment, Bartolomeo came running toward Luffy, tears of pride streaming down his face. But before he could get close, Hancock kicked him away. "What do you think you're doing?" she said angrily, before sitting beside Luffy and instantly transforming into a love-struck woman. "Luffy, let me serve you," she said excitedly. "Sure," Luffy replied, as Hancock's eyes turned into two hearts. "They seem pretty relaxed, even with a force as great as the government's waiting for us outside Wano," Nojiko said, approaching her sister and laughing a little at the scene unfolding in front of them. Usopp joined them as well, and Hugo approached shortly after Jinbei. "Looks like we have some time," Jinbei said. "Luffy, do you have any cola?" Frankie walked up with heavy steps due to his body. "Woof woof." Chouchou appeared at that moment, barking at them. "Nay. I think I'll prepare some takoyaki for everyone," Ecchi said, appearing as well. "Hey, Bippo. Bring the ship over here," Luffy requested as the bear had just arrived too. But before Bippo could respond, since the ship was docked at the entrance of the island where the first battles took place, Lami made her move, causing Black Pearl to appear near them as the ground trembled from the impact. "Now we have food to make something," Luffy said, while Ecchi nodded and headed toward the ship to start preparing things. "I think I can help too." Rage came from the side of Onigashima, flying quickly through the sky as she headed toward the ship's kitchen, having already taken care of the wounded that could still be saved with her flames. "Yo-oh-oh. Does anyone have milk for me?" Brook appeared as well, laughing. "Here." Luffy pulled out a fresh supply from his pocket and tossed it to him. "More drinks, my love?" Hancock sat beside Luffy as she asked, offering a bottle of expensive alcohol made from Whiskey Peak. "Sure," he said calmly. "Wait a minute. Aren't you going to say anything else about Nika?" Bonnie approached Luffy, pointing her finger at him, demanding more explanations. "Food," Lucy murmured from the ground, as her stomach started growling. Clearly, she didn't care much about Bonnie's questions. All she wanted now was to eat. Bonnie heard that and clenched her teeth, wanting to know more. Seeing Luffy not even paying attention to her frustrated her even more. "Hey, tell me," she demanded. "Just relax, we have some time to eat before we go back to fighting. Why are you in such a hurry? If you want to use your future distorting powers, just transform into whatever you saw when you watched Lucy fight." Luffy shrugged. "Food is ready." Rage stepped out of the ship with a gigantic platter of food while Ecchi was just finishing grilling his takoyakis, but Bonnie tried to speak, but someone jumped behind her. "Food." Lucy instantly sprang up from the ground, rushing toward Rage's enormous platter, leaving Bonnie completely lost. Looks like things ended up this way. Vivi couldn't help but murmur as she watched the scene in front of her. They certainly will always be like this. Robin also arrived, laughing with a hand over her mouth as she watched the feast unfold right on the same battlefield where they had fought. While they were eating and drinking, more and more crew members started arriving. Alvida jumped into Luffy's arms, almost making him spill his drink. "My husband," she said in a sweet tone, while Hancock, sitting beside him, looked furious. Her eyes turning white and steam puffing out of her nose like an enraged bull. "My husband. I defeated my sister for you." Lola also appeared at that moment, clinging to Luffy's back. "My husband." Shirahoshi also flew toward Luffy, pressing his head against her chest. As Hancock seemed to grow increasingly jealous of the situation, Luffy found himself unable to continue drinking as women clung to him from all possible angles. Baby 5, Rebecca, Perona, Monet, and Domino also approached, walking closer and observing as the group surrounded him. "What is this? Already drinking like this?" Perona complained, floating above Luffy. "Master, do you want me to serve you?" Baby 5 asked. "No, I am serving him," Hancock protested and demanded, as both she and Baby 5 seemed to shoot lightning bolts at each other with their eyes. Luffy mumbled, his voice muffled as no one could understand him. His face still pressed against Shirahoshi's chest. "Brother, try this." Lucy appeared with a piece of meat. Luffy responded. Are you sure? It'll be gone soon. Lucy seemed to understand her brother perfectly. I think I'll drink too. Ha 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 ha. Yamato also wanted to celebrate their victory, sitting down where the drinks were being served. Looks like things turned out this way. Nami murmured. Let's go join them too. Nojiko pulled her sister along as they sat down, with Reija placing the enormous platter in the center of the group, right beside Luffy's alcohol stash. Ecchi also started handing out his takoyakis to everyone. I think this calls for some good music, like a victory celebration. Brook suggested, pulling his guitar from a portal to the underworld. We're done here. Cavendish returned to normal as he walked over to Luffy. The captain of the Straw Hats finally managed to free himself from the mermaid's embrace, looking around with a smile as he saw the user of the storage no me placing the last captives in the separate space. Great, now join us. Luffy ordered. The sound of the guitar began with Brook, while Yuta joined in to sing. In an instant, the moment after the war turned into a massive banquet. Even though the entire battlefield was in ruins, the Straw Hats looked as cheerful as ever, all gathered together after the battle. Meanwhile, their enemies were still recovering from the destruction left behind by the fights. They had no idea that the targets they expected to find weakened were, in reality, laughing and celebrating just as they always did. Just like they had throughout most of their journey, whenever it was time for a feast. Chapter 481, Post-War Banquet 02. Wano is free. We avenged Odin. We finally took down Kaido. I'm so glad I came to be part of this. I feel like I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Yes. Even our fallen brothers in battle. They died with honor, and we will always remember them. The cheers among the people of Wano continued for a while. Looks like everyone is having fun, huh? Kawanatsu commented, looking at the crowd as the members of the 9 Red Scabbards gathered. Yes. We did our part here, though we weren't the main force in this fight. After all, the Straw Hats handled and finished off the major ones with ease. Nekomamushi remarked. Yes. I knew that if we didn't come here, we'd regret it. It seems to be true. And even if we weren't as crucial as we imagined, we were still part of the battle that freed Wano from Kaido's grasp. Inuarashi said beside his companion. You even showed up too, huh? Ashuradoji commented. Of course I did, and I almost lost the fight. I knew this was the only chance to settle the unfinished business from 20 years ago. A man among them spoke, having entered the battle halfway through. In the end, it looks like everything worked out, doesn't it, Princess? Denjiro commented, looking at Hori among them, wearing a samurai helmet and a cloak to keep herself hidden. Yes. When my brother arrives, everything will be as it should be, she said, gazing at the hole in the ceiling, where the sunlight shone through and the sounds of music echoed. Looks like everyone is heading there. Kikunojo said, watching as members of the fleet began climbing as well. Well then, let's go too. One of the Red Scabbards said as the entire Straw Hat Grand Fleet advanced toward the rooftop using moonwalk, the sound from above growing louder. Quickly, they arrived, and as they ascended, their sight was filled with thousands of people celebrating, holding a massive banquet, eating and drinking. Food and drinks were being distributed freely, as the fleet took over the entire place, and yet, the stock seemed endless. However, Luffy had already pulled nearly everything he had from his pockets to supply his entire fleet for a while. Hey, man. Use those stocks I gave you back in Dressrosa. Luffy shouted at the man with the storage no me, who nodded as he started freeing up space, releasing even more food and drink all over the place. The new Red Scabbard stood there, lost, watching all those pirates engaged in a massive feast. It was hard to process that they had defeated a pair of 4 emperors along with their entire crew, with almost everyone intact. At that moment, someone passed by the Red Scabbards. Princess. One of them murmured upon seeing Hori moving forward among the pirates on her own, not stopping. After a long walk, with the Red Scabbards following her, they reached the main group. Luffy was laughing alongside his crew and wives, eating and having fun. Yuta and Brook were leading the music, singing Bink's sake, while everyone joined their voices in a united chorus. Luffy laughed, took a sip of his drink, and looked to the side, seeing the Red Scabbards approaching. One of them had not been present at the initial attack on Wano, but Luffy had sensed his presence through Haki when they were invading Onigashima. He had appeared right in the middle of the battle. It would be good to get some information from him about Ace and the rest of the Whitebeard pirates. Someone advanced among them, approaching Luffy. Straw Hat. Princess Hori removed her samurai helmet, revealing her face and green hair. She looked at Luffy, pressing her lips together in a strange way, almost as if she were about to cry. 4 sharp gazes immediately fell upon her, as the 4 women surrounding Luffy, Alvida, Hancock, Lola, and Shirahoshi, did not seem inclined to let anyone else get close. However, Hori ignored them and stepped forward. Before anyone could react, she fell to her knees and lowered her head to the ground in a full bow, leaving the red scabbard stunned. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying a tearful tone. "Thank you for defeating Kaido and fighting for Wano." She expressed her gratitude in an unexpected way. Luffy raised an eyebrow at her before breaking into a friendly smile. "Don't worry about that, Kurisuke Hori. What matters now is that Wano is free, and we are going to put this country in order." Luffy responded to her in a calm tone, ignoring the music of his crewmates singing around him. "Do you promise?" she asked, raising her head and looking directly into his eyes. "Do you promise you won't be like Kaido?" It was obvious that Wano's fate was now in Luffy's hands. Hori didn't want him to become another tyrant like Kaido. Even though he had already said he wouldn't, she had to confirm once more. "Don't worry about that. I said I would help develop this country, and I won't abuse its people. Wano is safe now, but I want to develop this place so that, besides being a free and open country, it also becomes rich and powerful." "But there will still be a cost, won't there?" Hori asked. Luffy nodded, not denying it. "Yes, a cost for the sake of this world. For the final battle, I will need Wano's army. One way or another, they will have to fight for me," Luffy stated. Hori looked at the red scabbards who were there with her. They didn't quite know what to say about that, but in the end, they nodded. They owed it to the man who had led the battle and helped Wano after helping them fight for a better future. "Thank you for everything." Oden's father, Kazuki Sukiyaki, also appeared, expressing his gratitude. "Straw Hat, you are truly incredible. This will be a new dawn for Wano," Hyagro said. "Correct," Luffy confirmed. "Now stop talking and let's eat. But before that, how is the remaining crew of the Whitebeard pirates?" he asked directly to Izo, the last red scabbard to appear among the 7 present, who nodded before answering. "We are still trying to protect Pop's territories, but those damn Blackbeard pirates. They are doing everything they can to kill us," he said, and Luffy could feel the weight of those words. "I understand. We'll help them as soon as things stabilize here," Luffy replied. "Please, I would rather Pop's territories be under your flag than any other. Save my comrades. Pop's territories are all that's left of him," Izo pleaded, and Luffy nodded. "It will be done," he said. "And Ace said he's gotten stronger. He says he can take you down now," Izo added, now with a grin, shifting from his serious expression to a more playful tone. Luffy smiled. "Hey, you mentioned Ace. How is he?" At that moment, Lucy appeared with a huge piece of meat, approaching Izo to ask about her brother. "Well, now let's go. Join the banquet. It will only be for a moment, but don't eat too much and don't get too drunk," Luffy declared at the end, as everyone returned to eating, drinking, and celebrating. The party continued, but at the same time, after some time had passed since the tsunami and the explosions of water caused by Luffy's battle, the government ships finally began to re-establish themselves. "How many did we lose? How many?" The screams echoed through the Den Mushi. "We lost more than 200 ships, but all of our main war forces are landing on the remaining ships. However, there are still men in the sea. What should we do, sir?" a government agent reported, awaiting orders. Before he could answer, another Den Mushi beside him took the floor. "There is no time for that. Leave them. The objective is to defeat the Straw Hats. After the fight, they must be exhausted. We cannot let them recover. Advance immediately. This is an order." Saturn's voice echoed through the communicators, now back in control of the situation. "I see then," one of the agents listening murmured. The eyes of the pacifistas quickly began to flicker at that moment, glowing as if they were being activated. "Prepare for battle. We are heading to Wano," the commander ordered, while government agents ran back and forth, preparing for war. Meanwhile, Saturn, in his room, picked up a different Den Mushi. "Activate the execution order. Eliminate all the Straw Hats and their allies," Saturn commanded, and immediately, all the pacifistas had a slight change in their eyes, a sinister light glowing within them. Alongside them, the Seraphims opened their eyes, and the androids also began to move. "You are in command of the operation," he said, as a figure began to walk forward calmly, followed by others in the middle of the ship. They all wore helmets similar to those of astronauts, and the government agents lowered their heads in respect and fear. After all, they were the Holy Knights, one of the most powerful forces of the government, and they were ready to lead this overwhelming power, filled with admirals, seraphims, and pacifistas. You could say that this mission will be completed soon. After all, we have everything we need to destroy them. Even though they just fought against 2 emperors, we will show these inferior beings what happens when they dare to believe they are better than the gods of this world. His red hair swayed in the cold night wind as he looked toward Wano, where a small glow from the banquet of the Straw Hats was still visible. Luffy suddenly felt something. His gaze narrowed, as did those of all the powerful users of observation haki. Something was coming. Finally. Well. Looks like it's begun. Zoro murmured as he began to stand up. TSK, it was about time. Ono muttered. The fun is over. Everyone, listen up. The government is coming. Luffy raised his voice, grabbing the attention of the entire fleet. I want everyone prepared for the next battle. Take your positions on the ships, because this fight will happen at sea. The fleet listened to his words attentively. Quickly, people began to rise from the banquet, their gazes filled with determination. Yes, Captain. Let's go, everyone. One of the fleet captains shouted. Immediately, they started moving, jumping into the air using moonwalk and advancing toward the ships. Not just them, but many others followed the movement. The entrance to Onigashima was now filled with pirates, and the fleet's ships surged forward toward the next challenge they would face. Chapter 482, The Attack Against the Government begins. 01. Luffy pressed his hat as he took his first steps away from the group while everyone quickly began to move as well, rising from their places. His crew swiftly started walking toward the ship, while the fleet was preparing on the ships left in the port of Onigashima. The people of Wano could only watch as they departed. Hey, where are you going? The red scabbards shouted. Can't you see? This is our second war. Not against 4 emperors, but against the world government, lurking in the shadows, waiting to try and destroy us. But I was already expecting something like this. Now, let's see what they're sending to stop us. Luffy replied with an amused tone as he continued approaching the Black Pearl, walking calmly alongside his crew. Wait, are we fighting again? One of Wano's men couldn't help but shout, while everyone was still celebrating on the floors below them. No. This fight isn't yours. Just stay silent and watch. Luffy spoke calmly as all of his over 30 crew members, for the most part, looked on with excited smiles, following their captain. They're still going to fight. Dory murmured as she watched them leave. We dealt with the enemy forces inside Wano, now we'll handle the ones outside. With that, Luffy leaped onto the ship, followed by all his crew members jumping after him. Bippo, take us out of here. Luffy requested, and Bippo used his powers to levitate the ship, sending it soaring off the rooftop. The red scabbards, along with the Wano army members on the rooftop, stood there, frozen. There was no more banquet, no more celebration. The Straw Hat Pirates had vanished, heading off to another battle. This is really happening. One of them murmured, a bit lost. No one knew how to respond to that. The Black Pearl slammed into the water with full force at the head of the fleet, now at sea level within Wano's natural walls. Water exploded into the air as the ship reappeared at the front, leading all the other vessels. The modified animals were returning to the islands, brought by Bippo at that moment, ever since their leaders, Giran and Page 1, had sent the giant common beasts along with the dinosaurs. Fleet Commander, we are prepared. We are ready as well. All set here, Commander. Lord Luffy. All ships are ready. Luffy Sampa AI. Several Den Mushi began activating around Luffy, confirming that everyone was ready for the next war. Enel, check on our enemies. Luffy ordered as he felt his presence vanish near him. A bolt of lightning shot into the sky. Enel traveled outside of Wano in an instant and saw around 600 ships approaching in the dark sea. He sensed everything with his haki and had to admit. There, he felt threatened. Suddenly, something came toward him. He dodged quickly before a sword slash tore through the sky. His disgusted gaze fixed on the first enemy ships. You dare attack a god? Enel said in a dark tone, raising his arm. A lesser being dares to approach us? He heard a voice from the first ship and went into a frenzy, lightning beginning to surge around him. He shouldn't be attacking now. That idiot. Luffy murmured, crossing his arms as he looked up at the sky, seeing lightning starting to concentrate around Enel. The lightning Logia user was furious. Someone had provoked him. In the enemy fleet, the person in charge of leading the troops observed with disdain. That bastard. Does he think he can stand against the gods? The Tenri Obito murmured. Let me handle this attack. Someone stepped forward beside the commander. She was also a Tenri Obito, a woman with long blonde hair. She took a step forward as her commander didn't respond, confirming his silent approval. Then, white wings began to emerge from her back as she activated her hybrid angel form. From the sky, Enel looked down and began unleashing more and more thunder before launching a powerful strike, strong enough to hit over 100 ships at once. At that very moment, a figure dashed forward, leaving one of the ships and soaring into the sky. She raised her shield before her, which began to glow. Let them come. She murmured, creating a massive spectral shield. A divine defense. The lightning struck the shield with full force, exploding in all directions. The brightness of the attack could be seen from afar, but the angel woman's shield did not give in. Luffy raised an eyebrow at the sight. "Looks like she's here," he murmured, recalling the holy night he fought in Sabati after his return from Skypiea, following a year of training. That happened just 2 months ago. The lightning rapidly struck the other ships that weren't covered by the shield, causing several to explode. However, the angel woman protecting the fleet stood firm, preventing the ships behind her from being hit. "You two, go as well," Luffy ordered Vivi and Nami, who had remained reserved until now. Both of them sensed the presence of the attack and began flying into the sky above Wano. As they looked up, they saw the lightning fading as Enel's attack failed. It was their turn to act. Together, they combined their wind-based powers, gathering wind in their hands and creating a massive current of air before launching it forward, generating a colossal hurricane that descended from the sky toward the sea. Figurine-sama. Look at that. The government members quickly grew alarmed upon seeing the enormous typhoon touching the water. It expanded, creating a seawater hurricane as it advanced directly toward the fleet. The phenomenon had already grown so massive that it could swallow the entire fleet. "I'll handle this." The Tenri Obito named Figurine stepped forward, drew his sword, and prepared to counter the attack. Nami and Vivi were stunned when, suddenly, a massive sound erupted from behind their hurricane. Without observation haki, they were caught off guard as their attack was simply cut in half by a horizontal slash, which then continued toward them at incredible speed. The slash raced toward them, and they barely dodged at the last second, as the impact soared through Wano's sky and exploded into a wave of energy so intense that it even interrupted the celebrations of the citizens in the country. "Hey, what was that? Didn't they defeat Gdu?" one of the townspeople asked, worried. "What was that noise just now? Is the fight not over? So we're celebrating for nothing?" Another murmured, confused about who the new enemy was. "Nami, Vivi, get back here," Luffy commanded. Vivi and Nami quickly rushed back to the ship, returning to the waters within Wano. This was too much for them to handle. Only the full strength of the fleet would be enough to face these enemies. Even Enel, already frustrated by hearing those Tenri Obito call themselves gods, returned as well, transforming back into lightning. "Well, looks like we have some dangerous enemies. Can you tell me how many of those helmeted men are over there?" Luffy asked Enel as soon as he returned to the main ship. "9 of them," Enel murmured. "I see. Looks like the world government isn't wasting any time," Luffy remarked. The captain then looked at everyone around him. "Well, seems like this will be even more dangerous than fighting 2 emperors and their crews. I hope all of you are ready." He gave each of his crew members a serious look, making sure they understood what they were getting into. Some trembled, of course, but still nodded. None of them wanted to back down while their comrades fought. Luffy grinned. "The world government must be watching us right now. So, it's time for us to put on a little show and shake this world even more. After all, after today, we will be the greatest force on the seas." Everyone felt the weight of his words. Luffy picked up a Den Mushi and made a call on a secure line. "So, you say this will destroy all transmissions that the pacifistas can send directly to Mary Joyce?" Luffy asked, looking at a metallic object in his hands. "Yes. They won't be able to collect their data if you activate this type of anti-transmitter." The voice from the Den Mushi came from an old man with his tongue sticking out and an enormous head, confirming the information. "I see. Thank you, Dr. Vegapunk. You've given me some very valuable information," Luffy said clearly. He hadn't known that the world government was gathering data on his abilities and strength. That was extremely dangerous because they could use it against him. Luffy didn't like the idea of the world government studying his techniques. He had no way of predicting what they could create with that information. If they had already developed the Seraphim, who was to say they couldn't create clones of him or cyborgs with his abilities? Vegapunk had already mentioned that the government had collected some data on him during battles at the start of the New World. "You also gave me some highly privileged information, Monkey D. Luffy. So, it's only fair that I cooperate as well. After all, haven't we become allies in the past month?" Vegapunk said. Luffy nodded. He had managed to get in contact with Vegapunk to discuss several important matters. Their conversation had revealed crucial details about what he would face on Egghead Island and how the government planned to eliminate him. A real alliance was beginning to take shape between them. "All right. We'll see each other soon, Vegapunk. Prepare everything I asked of you," Luffy said. "Yes. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person." The Den Mushi clicked off. Luffy certainly had a lot to talk about with Vegapunk. He had made a promise to deal with Bartholomew Kuma, as he had vowed to Bonnie that he would try to save him. He also hoped to finally uncover more of the world's secrets. Besides that, he had a certain technique he had discovered in East Blue. One that no one else could use. Even he hadn't fully learned it, only managing to extract a few things. He had barely scratched the surface, but maybe Vegapunk was the key to fully unlocking and training it for the final battle. Luffy remained silent for a moment, looking at his crew. They waited attentively. Then, he raised his voice and announced firmly, "Attention, all fleet. Prepare for battle. We're advancing right now." With the order given, the ships began to move. Bippo activated his powers, bringing the ships to the surface. The fleet now had 105 ships. Some had been destroyed in the first battle against the pirates, but the crews of the 6 lost ships had boarded the remaining vessels. Thus, they began to leave Wano, heading straight toward the world government's fleet. There were 600 enemy ships at sea level, waiting for the Straw Hat fleet, armed with the best military equipment available. More than ever, the government was determined to destroy the Straw Hats and their allies once and for all. Chapter 483, The Attack Against the Government begins. 02. The ships quickly approached sea level below Wano as the fleet crashed against the water. Soon, the other ships followed behind, all aligning in front of the enemy. One after another, the 105 ships kept crashing against the sea, positioning themselves directly in front of the enemy fleet, just behind Black Pearl. "What are those things?" Usopp murmured, a little frightened, sensing with his haki the things inside the government ships. "So, they finally decided to use them. It's the first time I've seen this," Luffy said to himself, observing the seraphim. And it wasn't just a few. There were other things as well. This. But his eyes widened as he saw someone there. "Shanks?" Lucy exclaimed, stepping closer to Luffy at the front upon noticing the red-haired man. However, something was wrong. He wasn't wearing the pirate attire that Luffy remembered, but rather the uniform of a holy knight. Moreover, Luffy immediately narrowed his eyes as he noticed another shocking detail: he had no scar and possessed both arms. "This isn't Shanks," he murmured, still stunned by what he was seeing. He didn't know this man, but his appearance was identical to Shanks, and at the same time, he wasn't a clone, at least not from what Luffy could sense. He leaped, landing on the prow of the ship as he stared at the Challenger. His ship was the first to approach the enemy, with Bippo carrying him to 30 meters away from the first government ship. Meanwhile, the entire fleet surrounded them head-on. 600 ships against 105. At that moment, everyone could see the massive number of pacifistas. At least 1,500 of them. This made many cautious, but no one backed down, for their commander was there, on the front lines. "You're Tenri Obito, aren't you?" Luffy asked openly, staring at the red-haired man for a few seconds before posing the question. He looked at him with interest. He certainly had Shanks' strength. "Huh? How insolent." The man laughed with disdain. "I have no reason to answer a question from an inferior being who's about to die." "Interesting. Fine, no need to answer, after all. You're the one who's going to die soon," Luffy declared. "How dare this bastard speak to us like that?" One of the 9 Tenri Obito and holy knights behind the red-haired man spoke angrily. Luffy ignored the provocation, while the man identical to Shanks glared at him with a certain hatred. It seemed he didn't like Luffy's words very much. "Either way, the world government is watching us, aren't they?" Luffy asked, then continued. "Let me guess. The reverie is still happening. So they're broadcasting this to the kings, right? You want to show them that you can destroy us?" He mocked, flashing a wide grin. "Yes." The man resembling Shanks answered calmly. Meanwhile, in Mary Jo's, after the chaos caused by the explosion, things had calmed down. People were cleaning up all the debris, especially the shards of glass from the windows that had shattered throughout the city. Just like in every other place in the New World. All the kings were in position as the transmission resumed, now showing Monkey D. Luffy standing at the prow of his ship, with his fleet right behind him. The holy knights were staring at Luffy's ship in front of the Den Den Mushi, with the person filming right there. Luffy noticed that Den Den Mushi at that moment and looked directly at it. "I hope I have a good audience right now. Kings, queens, and the Gorosei." He grinned. Some of the kings swallowed hard upon seeing him. They certainly feared Luffy and the audacity he displayed, even in the face of the world government's high council. Now that he had defeated Gdu, he had solidified his position on the seas. "They don't seem very injured or tired," one of the Gorosei muttered, frowning as he observed the Straw Hats. "Move the Den Den Mushi to the front of the ship. I want to speak with the pirate," one of the Gorosei ordered through another transmitter. "Yes, sir." The other side quickly responded. On the broadcast screen, government agents could be seen running to the front of everyone, positioning the Den Den Mushi at the front of the other ship. "Monkey D. Luffy." The voice of the Gorosei echoed through the transmission. Luffy raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms, looking directly at the image. "You must be Saint Shepherd Jupiter," Luffy said. "That guy." His voice seemed to be ahead of all the others. After all, It was him who had given the order regarding Lulusa, which would take place in the future. I'm surprised you know me. The Gorosei's voice sounded again. In any case, I am officially declaring, at this moment, the end of your activities as a pirate and those of your entire crew. You are an immense threat to the seas and cannot be allowed to continue living. Well, I thought we had an agreement. So that means you're breaking it, right? Luffy laughed, while the kings only listened in silence. The only exception was Makino, who looked extremely worried, as well as Kaya and the governor of Kokoyasi Kingdom. The other kings watched everything with curiosity, fear, and even anger. For some, it was a difficult situation, but others felt a hidden satisfaction. Finally, they could get rid of these pirates roaming the seas. You know we can retaliate for this, right? Luffy asked calmly, looking at the Den Mushi. We are well aware of that, Monkey D. Luffy. However, we have already prepared for this situation. The Gorosei responded. I'd like to see that. Luffy smiled. Then, without hesitation, he gave an order. Vippo, destroy Mary Joey's. Everyone's eyes widened upon hearing this. Vippo, who had now put his wig back on. Something Luffy had prepared for this occasion. Nodded. Quickly, he raised his hand, and in the next moment, a fiery light began to appear in the sky, summoning a meteor. At the same time, the red-haired Tenri Obito charged directly to kill Vippo, unsheathing his sword and dashing towards him on a black pearl. However, Luffy appeared in front of him, blocking both of his swords. With a swift movement, he clashed his blade against the enemy's sword, generating an explosion of haki that spread in all directions. Damn. You must have the same strength as Shanks. Luffy murmured, a thrilled grin forming on his face. The man before him looked both surprised and frustrated. The Conqueror's haki, combined with the clash of three blades, quickly affected everyone around. Even those of higher rank had to brace themselves. Meanwhile, Vippo had already set his meteor on course for Mary Joey's. In the distance, an intense glow began to spread as the enormous burning stone advanced across the sky toward the horizon. 3 meteors were heading straight for Mary Joey's. The Tenri Obito who was fighting grew frustrated and quickly backed away. But then, he simply smirked. At that moment, his shadow on the deck of the ship suddenly began to distort. From within it, someone emerged and charged directly at Luffy, catching everyone by surprise. All those around widened their eyes, having no time to react upon seeing an assassin suddenly appear. However, Luffy just smiled. In the next instant, he dropped one of his swords, grabbed his pistol, and aimed it at the assassin's head. The man was suddenly paralyzed in midair, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He only managed to see the gun pointed at him before Luffy pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed across the deck, and the lifeless body of the assassin fell heavily onto the ship. The red-haired Tenri Obito, frustrated, retreated to his ship upon realizing his plan had failed. Like I said, you can't trust the world government. Luffy mocked. These guys always have dirty schemes on every side, like worms. He declared for all to hear, as everyone present, including the kings, listened. The Gorosei, clearly, did not like those words at all. Regardless, before the meteors could fall, Luffy turned his gaze back to the Den Mushi transmitting the Gorosei and smiled. I know you must already have a plan to protect yourselves from this. After all, you wouldn't be so confident if you didn't have a way to defend against our attack. At that moment, a frozen heart appeared in Luffy's hand. You do know we have some of your beloved Holy Knights' hearts, right? Luffy taunted. After all, Lamy had collected some of their hearts during the war. Though they hadn't been killed. Since there had been no reason to do so yet. He had kept them. And now, they could use them. The Gorosei and the elders tensed at the sight. 4 of the 7 most powerful Tenri Obito from the Holy Knights were, at that moment, in the hands of Monkey D. Luffy. You bastard. The Shanks lookalike tried to speak but couldn't even finish his sentence. In the next moment, Luffy simply burned the heart with amethyst flames, completely paralyzing its owner. A Tenri Obito within the group let out a scream that echoed through the air. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony, until his body finally perished, his heart consumed by the flames. Silence took over. Even the kings and queens swallowed hard, while the Gorosei maintained a dark and cold expression. They had known this was a possibility, but seeing it happen firsthand was something else entirely. Once again, Luffy was showing the world that he could kill the so-called gods of this world with terrifying ease. In the sky, the meteors drew ever closer to Mary Joey's, illuminating the horizon. The only thing the Gorosei felt now was hatred toward Luffy. Meanwhile, Luffy picked up another heart. Well, let's get rid of them all at once. He said calmly. You bastard. The Tenri Obito, the plasma user who had appeared in Manafort, saw his heart in Luffy's hands and realized he was about to die just like his comrade. Immediately, he radiated with intense energy, charging at full speed toward Luffy. Lamy, Luffy spoke the name with simple ease, even as the plasma user dashed toward him. The attack came in a devastating kick, similar to Kizaru's, but much more aggressive, without the Admiral's characteristic phrase. At the moment Luffy was about to be struck by the Haki-imbued plasma kick. He vanished. In the place where he had stood, only the heart remained. The Tenri Obito didn't even have time to react before seeing his own attack crush his heart, destroying it completely. He stared at it, stunned, before simply feeling his own body fade away. In the next moment, everyone watched as the Holy Knight fell to his knees before collapsing, dead. Look. We have another Holy Knight down. And one who, ironically, committed suicide. Luffy said calmly as he walked back to the prow, glancing at the body on the ground. Lamy had swapped his position at the last moment, leaving only the heart behind. Even the Tenri Obito, who had once been arrogant, were now in shock. Now, 2 of their comrades, 2 of the most powerful, had fallen. The original group of 9 had been reduced to 7, and of the 7 strongest, 4 had come here, with 2 already dead. The scene was eerily reminiscent of Manafort, making all the kings swallow hard. That bastard. He did this. The Gorosei muttered, nearly unleashing their haki in fury. All the kings and queens watched the scene, suffocated by terror. But Luffy wouldn't even give them the satisfaction of striking back. Well, either way, let's end this. Luffy declared. He looked once more directly into the transmission camera. Unfortunately for you, people of Mary Joyce, you won't be able to see any more of the fight. We'll leave the surprise for the end. When the transmission returns. The Gorosei narrowed their eyes, wondering what he meant by that. Do it. Luffy ordered. At that moment, Enel, positioned at the highest point of the Black Pearl, held a strange machine. He began discharging electricity into it. In the next instant, a surge of energy spread in all directions, quickly striking every Den Mushi, knocking them out instantly. But this wasn't Enel's usual technique. It was a machine developed by Dr. Vegapunk, based on a project Luffy had requested back in Dressrosa. It had been swiftly executed by Frankie and allied scientists. The Gorosei and the elders watched helplessly as the transmission was abruptly cut off. Silence filled the room. Then, in an explosion of pure rage, the table shattered beneath the fist of one of the Gorosei. That bastard. Was all they could say. Now, they were completely blind to what would happen next. This machine didn't just cut off the Den Mushi transmissions. It also blocked any information the pacifistas would have relayed through their connection to Mary Joyce. Chapter 484, Attack on Mary Joyce. They fell silent upon seeing all that, as they waited for the elders to act and let their displayed anger subside. We can't see what will happen after everything we planned. One of the Gorosei said, gritting his teeth in frustration, as they had been certain that the data would be transmitted easily, even with the user of the Thunder Fruit model, Lightning Human Devil Fruit, who had the ability to destroy transmissions through radio waves. The government had sought a new way to bypass that and succeeded, thanks to Vegapunk. What they never imagined was that the Straw Hats had a way to circumvent this, and they had no idea how it had been done. Now, after everything had been planned and they hoped to display their superiority to all those who followed them and were part of the world government, in the end, they had ended up blind. It doesn't matter anymore. St. Marcus Mars, who seemed the calmest among them all, commented, pausing before continuing. They can't defeat them. You know this force was assembled precisely to destroy any enemy of the world government. He spoke to calm the others as well, while they simply looked at each other. It seemed they were feeling the uncomfortable sensation of the possibility of losing. That seemed to calm them a little, as they turned their attention back to the kings and queens, who were confused and uneasy. It seems we've had a problem transmitting the war from Wano's side. We hope it will return to normal soon. In the meantime, we must wait. We need to get our agents to the location again. Shepherd Jupiter said. Of course, Elder Sama. One of the kings murmured nervously. Yes, we understand. Those evil pirates must have done something. Some kings murmured with a bit of fear after seeing the anger of those 4, while others remained silent with a cautious and worried look. Shepherd Jupiter said nothing about those comments and addressed everyone, trying to maintain order. While we have no images of what is happening in Wano, let's view the second part of our fleet, which has now arrived in Dressrosa. He said, as another screen began to appear. This is the battle against the countries that betrayed the world government and the territories of those pirates, while we move part of our forces to dominate the Straw Hats. One of them said, and the image still seemed to be trying to stabilize until, suddenly, it shut off without showing anything else. We will use another part to defeat their allies. He noticed now that the image had turned off. What is this? Where is the image? They asked immediately, frowning. Sir, we've lost connection with the other part of the fleet as well. A government official entered the room, saying those words, making the Gorosei even more stunned as they furrowed their brows. What is this now? We can't see either side of the war? They asked in frustration. It seems the enemy was well prepared. The plan is turning against us now. Even so, it's hard to believe that the Straw Hats found out about this. After all, it was that man who created this new transmission. One of them murmured, frustrated. Leave that aside, let's deal with our immediate problems. Another said as the sky began to glow. All the kings were forced to turn their faces upon seeing the glow coming from the broken windows, shattered by Luffy's impact. Immediately, the sky turned red before everyone, and this threw them into a panic as they saw what was forming in the sky. That's a meteor coming this way. A king murmured in disbelief. They're really sending a meteor to Mary Jo Eyes. This is beyond madness. Another stammered. Ah! A queen screamed in despair as she covered her face with her hand, not knowing how they could get out of there. Quick! We have to get out of here. Another king exclaimed. Yes, I don't want to die either. Another responded. Those pirates. They intend to kill all the kings, even those from their own countries. Others murmured, looking at Makino and the kings from East Blue. Don't worry about that. One of the Gorosei finally spoke with a calm tone, already expecting this. After all, we are prepared. That man prepared a few more measures for this over the past year. As soon as he spoke, he picked up the Den Mushi and ordered, activate the city's defense system. Everyone fell silent upon hearing that, anxiously waiting with some fear as they looked at the elders and the glowing sky. The man who received the call quickly responded, yes, sir. And hung up. Quickly, activate the shield. The agent ordered at an operations base within the city. They were in front of computers, starting to activate the system Vegapunk had created precisely to protect them from the Straw Hats' attacks over the past year. A huge light emerged from the city's center, beginning to rise high into the sky, surprising everyone, and covering the entire area, creating a protective barrier around Mary Jo Eyes. It seems we might not even be necessary. One of the holy knights murmured. Yes. Another replied. They were on the rooftops, watching with interest as the entire place activated the protection they were already aware of. Still, they remained there to defend the sacred land in case the barrier failed. Whether it was the Tenri Obito and their slaves, the men from the kingdoms who were there as guards and servants of the kings and queens, the marines, the government agents, or even those who were hidden in Mary Jo Eyes. Everyone watched as the barrier closed. An ethereal glow enveloped the entire city, protecting it, possibly even beneath the ground. Meanwhile, the meteors continued approaching closer and closer. So, this is how the world government is protecting itself from Luffy. Sabo murmured beside his hidden companions. Garp and Kobe looked on in surprise, watching the city being sealed as the meteors drew nearer and nearer. What a beautiful glow. Come on, this brightened my mood after the windows of my house were destroyed. I want to see it up close. A Tenri Obito said, not realizing the gravity of the situation, causing his slave, who carried him like a horse, to listen and obey his orders while admiring the beauty of the sky, unaware that they were meteors. The Gorosei watched everything in silence, hoping the barrier would be capable of protecting them. They could see the future with their haki, but even so, they wanted to test it, to know if it would truly withstand the power of the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit, which was sending those meteors. If it failed, they would act quickly against them before chaos took over the city. The meteors kept falling, advancing toward the city. Every moment, they drew closer. That's getting closer. The Tenri Obito finally realized it was not just a glow in the sky, as he tried to save his life. Many others seemed to have the same realization and were acting similarly. Until, at last, they collided with the barrier. Boom. The brightness was so intense that no one could look directly at it. Immediately, an explosion followed the collision between the meteors and the barrier, which trembled violently. The city felt the impact, causing everyone there to be startled, as all emergency protocols were activated. Hey, hey! If that gets through the barrier, we're all going to die. One of the kings exclaimed, rising from his chair in terror, while others shared the same fear. The Gorosei, on the other hand, remained calm, observing everything with interest. The explosion continued for a while, but soon everything seemed to be calming down. All the residences in Mary Jo Eyes shook, and then, a second meteor collided with the shield, followed shortly by a third. Once again, everything seemed to crumble even more. People were frightened and screaming. Even the Tenri Obito throughout the city, who had initially watched with a certain amusement, after seeing the destruction caused, immediately became afraid and began to scream, shouting for someone to stop it or running to their bunkers, built after the first attack when Bappa launched the meteors. The explosion continued for some time until the final impact shook the shield like a wave, rippling in all directions. But in the end, it remained intact, even after several meteors, and the city emerged protected. It seems the shield was a success. One of the Gorosei said, looking satisfied as everyone watched. I'm sure Imsama will be pleased with this. Another replied in a low tone so that no one but them could hear. Things finally began to calm down. The flames over Mary Jo's eyes quickly started to extinguish. The kings, who had been terrified moments before, began to smile with excitement upon realizing they were safe. We are safe. I knew the world government would have a defense like this. One of them exclaimed, relieved. So it was Straw Hat who sent those meteors? Almost 2 years ago. A queen murmured, thoughtful. She remembered reading in a newspaper about meteors falling from the sky, with no one knowing exactly what had happened. After all, the world government never said it was the Straw Hats who had launched that attack, as it would have shocked the world. But we are safe after all, thanks to the world government. Another began to speak, and upon hearing that, several other kings smiled and shouted in celebration. The Gorosei, on the other hand, remained silent, merely observing the shield's outcome with interest, ignoring the celebrations of the kings and queens from all seas. Vice Admiral Garp. Kobe murmured cautiously in the middle of the city. It was Luffy who sent those meteors. But he clearly knew we would be protected. After all, he wouldn't have sent something like that here without being sure, with Makino and the others present. He wanted to prove something. Garp replied with a serious look. Meanwhile, Didin was clinging to Garp's feet at that moment, her face in tears after having run to him upon seeing the meteors, begging for help so they would destroy those things before everyone died. Now she cried with joy, but she heard Garp talk about Luffy putting her in the worst situation of her life. After all, who was she compared to meteors? You're saying it was Luffy who sent that? Is he out of his mind? Does he want to kill us? Didin exclaimed furiously, clearly angry and ready to kill Luffy. Vice Commander. A revolutionary whispered to Sabo, the vice leader of the revolutionary army, who was also observing everything with interest during this operation in Mary Jo's eyes. It looks like things have calmed down, but we should start moving. Don't you think? Sabo said, revealing a subtle smile. Behind him, a small group of revolutionaries waited in silence, merely awaiting his command to move. Let's take advantage of the distraction and invade the castle. A man dressed in dark feathers, like a crow, murmured, keeping close to Sabo. Yes, let's begin. Sabo confirmed firmly. Thus, they began to move silently, advancing through Mary Jo's eyes, while everyone was still trying to recover from the impact of the meteors. The Tenri Obito, for their part, cursed and raged all around, taking their anger out on their slaves after everything that had happened. Chapter 485, The World Government's Speech. Kings and queens of all nations under the banner of the world government. Suddenly, one of the elders present spoke, drawing everyone's attention once again. Today, in the face of the chaos and the affront that has befallen this sacred land of Mary Jo's, you all witnessed, for a moment, the terror and despair that the enemies of order try to sow. Meteors tore through the skies, aiming to destroy us without a second thought, and all of us could have been targets of the devastation they would have caused. He spoke as everyone swallowed dryly. Monkey D. Luffy and all under his banner are enemies of the peace and stability we have built for over 700 years, and now this group dares to openly challenge the power that governs this world. And now, after the impact that was stopped thanks to measures the world government has been implementing for a year, you all have seen the undeniable truth. He said this, his face growing darker and more serious, while no one paid attention anymore to the barrier that had started to dissolve after the danger was no longer present. There is someone in this world who dares to defy the forces of the world government, and that is an affront to all of you here. There was once a pirate like this, so long ago that we erased him from history. Now another one appears, and he is even more dangerous than the last, Roxy Zebek. His tone harked back to a few decades earlier, when the Rocks pirates spread terror across all the seas, even hunting down Tenri Obito. Not that the world government would ever reveal such information, but for the elders, Monkey D. Luffy was undoubtedly far worse. The pirate not only had a much more threatening user of the float fruit model, flying human devil fruit in his crew. Since Shiki had never used meteors to launch attacks anywhere in the world. But he also had Nika and several powerful fruit users in a crew composed of more than 30 members. There were 3 Logias and 12 mythical zones, not to mention the other Paramsha users. 10 more members. In this crew, every single one could use the 6 techniques exclusive to the Holy Knights, and all possessed mastery of Haki, with some being overwhelmingly powerful in certain types. Not to mention the frustration of knowing that Vegapunk's failed project had fallen into their hands and was used on the Princess of Dressrosa. She could now turn King Riku's granddaughter into a dragon as large as Kaido, closely mimicking his powers. This realization left them infuriated, as the project had not been as much of a failure as it once seemed. Now, to all the Gorosei, this crew had grown tremendously powerful, with many allies. So much so that they all appeared perfectly well after battling 4 emperors' crews and coming out with almost no casualties. That fact had not gone unnoticed, and it certainly surprised the Gorosei when they saw the broadcast before it was cut off. Monkey D. Luffy had become the most dangerous pirate in the world to the government, and they could no longer act as they had before. They needed to eliminate him and his crew there, trusting that after some time, with all their forces against them, it would finally be done. The elder was about to continue his speech, while all the kings remained silent. But one of them stood up at that moment. There are kings and queens from their homelands here. We could use them as hostages too. King Seiki of Lulusa exclaimed, pointing at Makino, Kaya, and the others. There is no need for that. The Gorosei said, interrupting him, as King Seiki sat back down in silence. For the force we are sending will be enough to destroy any group that has ever risen in this world. Saint Shepherd Jupiter spoke again. Meanwhile, in the New World, Luffy looked at his enemies with a smile. No one, except those present there, could see what was about to happen next. Launch the attack, destroy all the government forces and kill all the Tenri Obito. Luffy gave the order, holding Ace and Inma, before entering his hybrid form and charging towards the enemy. Everyone has witnessed that the world government possesses the power to counter the forces of evil and disorder. We will not allow this to continue. You witnessed our barrier against the enemy attack, but you will truly see our power when the transmission resumes. No force, no pirate, no revolutionary will be capable of shaking the foundations we have built for centuries. Saint Shepherd Jupiter resumed his speech in merry joys, unaware of what was happening in the waters of Wano. Near Wano, explosions began to erupt while the darkness of the night was still illuminated by the battles, with purple flames soaring into the sky. The clash of conquerors' hockey began to shake the entire area. Men screamed, cannons fired at one another, while ships rammed into each other like ancient naval battles. Colossal beings began to emerge, and enormous roars echoed across the area. Loud enough for Blackbeard and the people of Wano to hear from a distance, accompanied by a spectacle of lights. In merry joys, those who dare to raise their swords against us, those who believe they can challenge the will of those who control this world, will soon taste the fate we reserve for all who betray the world order. The Straw Hats, their allies, and any nation that allows itself to be seduced by the vain promises of anarchy will not simply be defeated. They will be eradicated. Their names will be forgotten. Their lands will be reclaimed. Their ideals will be crushed beneath the weight of the absolute power we wield. Near Wano, the sound of lasers being fired by pacifistas echoed, while beings never before unleashed by the world government began to take action. What is that? A child. Zoro murmured, looking at the child who landed in front of him after defeating 30 pacifistas. The child's black wings began to ignite with red flames, and he raised his sword into a stance. That stance? Zoro could not hide his shock, recognizing that position from his fight against Mihawk at Maniford. In the next instant, the two began clashing swords. In merry joys, I know you all felt fear when you saw the meteors in the sky. We know how you must fear the Straw Hats when they can simply destroy any of your kingdoms with that power. But as long as the world government exists, that fear will never become reality. For we are the guardians of this world. We are the firm hand that governs the seas. And we are the force that no man, no devil fruit, no army of barbarians will ever be able to overcome. Near Wano, Ice Dragon. 1 billion volt Hamaru. Stone Colossus Punch. Thunder 8 trigrams. Explosive Punch. Great Hurricane. Phoenix Explosion. How dare you defy the master? Kong Gun. The attacks kept coming from the enemies, to the despair of the agents, as explosions erupted everywhere, tearing apart government ships while their crews could only scream before being vaporized. Flaming Comet Punch. Then a massive explosion erupted from the sky. That. Luffy's opponent could only look on in shock as the flames rushed toward him. Boom. In merry joys, the Straw Hat Pirates. Those you have heard whispers of in newspapers and rumors. Are nothing but a spark that has drawn attention in recent years and spread terror because we underestimated them from the beginning and allowed them to grow. But we are the storm that extinguishes all flames. The force we have mobilized to crush this threat is the greatest ever assembled. Our holy knights, our agents, and our soldiers are ready. They advance now to crush every rebellion, every traitor, and to wipe the remnants of this insurrection from the maps. Near Wano. That. Giants. An agent pointed to the dark sky as the lightning began to illuminate and reveal the enormous creatures emerging there, making them feel tiny. The Cypher Pol Zero agents among them quickly advanced into the sky to stop all the creatures appearing. We're losing on this side. A man tried to shout for reinforcements as the fleet, led by several Straw Hat captains, began to surround the government forces from both flanks. In merry joys. This does not concern only the Straw Hats, for those who have dared to challenge us will see their nations burn. Those who harbored pirates will see their cities sink into oblivion, The justice of the world government will be inexorable. There will be no mercy now. No pirate will see the light of tomorrow. And no enemy of order will have a grave to be remembered. Near Wano. The dragon flew across the sky alongside the phoenix, beginning to unleash beams of light and flames, devastating all the ships, reducing them to vapor. This can't go on like this. A world government commander growled as he raised his sword. His uniform was burned from Luffy's last attack, but he continued fighting with all his might, though he appeared slightly scorched. "Go, Cerberus!" he exclaimed as his weapon began to take shape. "That?" Luffy was a little surprised at the sight of a Cerberus emerging from his weapon. But before the dark Cerberus could launch itself at Luffy, Chaochu appeared in the air, transforming into his own Cerberus form to protect his master. Both Cerberuses clashed in that moment, while Luffy grinned and the Holy Knight, resembling Shanks, grew frustrated. In merry Joe eyes. "You, kings and queens, who are under our protection, will prosper. Your riches will grow. Your dynasties will endure for centuries. For that is the future the world government guarantees to those who bow before the truth of order." Near Wano. "This is so fun. Ha 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 ha." A laughter burst out in the middle of the fight. In merry Joe eyes. "Never forget this day. Never forget what you saw and what you heard. Today, you witnessed the failure of your enemies and the greatness of those who govern this world." Near Wano. "How are we losing like this?" an agent murmured. In merry Joe eyes. "The supremacy of the world government is absolute." Near Wano. "You said you were a god. I see they were just words." Enel's voice mocked his opponent as the man began to kneel with a huge hole in his stomach. "You insolent inferior." The Holy Knight could not believe it as he died right there. In merry Joe eyes. "Let every kingdom present here take this message back to their people. The world is ruled by our will. And anyone who dares challenge this truth will be erased from history." Near Wano. Then it emerged. A conqueror's haki more powerful than any other, drawing everyone's attention. The lightning, instead of yellow, turned into pure red, causing everyone to be stunned as their focus shifted toward the one who unleashed it. In merry Joe eyes. "Glory to the world government. Glory to eternal order." Near Wano. The battle raged on as the government forces no longer seemed as confident as before, and the fighting continued for several more hours. As the sun finally began to rise in the east, it signaled that a new dawn was approaching. Chapter 486, It's over, but there is still a new threat. The sea was still a little rough, while everything finally seemed to calm down after hours of battles. At the end of that night, as wreckage and hulls floated over the waters of the New World, along with pieces of robots, largely burned and torn flags of various symbols, but mainly of the world government, the seabed was taken over by silence. Suddenly, that was what dominated the place that, until a few hours ago, had been the center of chaos. Meanwhile, in the sky, Luffy looked amused at his opponent, who was frustrated, bleeding, and missing an arm, with blood flowing from a hemorrhage. "Now you look more like Shanks," he mocked, remembering Shanks when he was saved so long ago. Despite being a sad memory, with Luffy blaming himself at the time, the man in front of him sent a look of hatred so intense that even he himself could not remember ever having looked at anyone like that before. Now without strengthened allies, he found himself cornered. What will you do now? Will you continue this fight and die, or will you flee, trying to save your life like the kicked dog that you are, self-proclaimed god? Luffy provoked, while all those still standing after this war watched in silence. The man gritted his teeth so hard that his own lips bled. Then, in the next moment, he turned and began to shoot away from there, someone who seemed to have accepted defeat and advanced to flee, trying to preserve his life. Luffy watched that, amused, and began to emanate flames from the two swords he held. In the next instant, flaming slashes began to chase after the last standing Tenri Obito, who was trying to escape. He started dodging the attacks in the air, foreseeing the future, and sometimes he turned and struck with his own sword to deflect the attacks while continuing to advance as far away as possible. He looked up and also saw meteors starting to fall in his direction, with Bippo also helping, and Enel began making lightning fall from the sky, trying to hit him from the distant clouds. The Holy Knight there did not have an easy moment as he had to dodge high-speed attacks or even cut one of them, while burning more and more and feeling his body being damaged, but he did not stop. He managed to get away while the sea became agitated again due to the attacks, but without creating large tsunamis, with Bippo sending smaller meteors. He escaped after some time, dodging all attacks, with nothing more able to reach him as he disappeared into the horizon. Luffy just sighed, but he did not seem frustrated for not being able to kill him. After all, he was very tired, like everyone in his crew at that moment, and a pursuit would not be worth the effort. That is why he did not continue, not while he had other matters to deal with as well. His gaze turned to the main crew. They were all alive and well, although many were injured and even some were unconscious. Chopper was lying passed out, like Rebecca, who was being cared for by her father. Hugo, Brooke, Pedro, and Monet were also lying on the ground, but all alive, although quite injured, and those who were conscious were not far from that state. His gaze fell to the fleet, or what was left of it. At least 40 ships, out of the initial 100, had been destroyed, and some captains ended up dead. A large part of the animals also fell, and their bodies were lying in the Dead Sea along with the enemies. Unfortunately, this fight was full of losses. It was a much greater force than the fight against Do and Big Mom. But this was war. There was no way to avoid casualties. Luffy would mourn their deaths later. With a sigh, Luffy began to descend toward the Black Pearl. The ship had several broken parts. For the first time, it had suffered some damage in a battle since they had started sailing together. Luffy, did we win? I mean, there's no more fighting at this moment? Nami approached Luffy. Her clothes were a little torn, and she looked tired as she gazed at her husband. First, how are they? Luffy ignored her question and turned his gaze to Reiju and Lummi, who were treating whoever they could, since Chopper was also down. None of them are in danger. Lummi said. Great. Then go look for those who are seriously injured, he requested, as he saw people dying on the other ships and the islands they had brought. Reiju and Lummi left the ship, while Luffy finally turned his attention back to Nami, who was still waiting for his answer. No. It's not over. He spoke in a serious tone. What? She couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock. There's no point in complaining now. If the captain is saying there's another fight, we shouldn't stop now. Zoro spoke. He was a little injured after fighting several enemies at once. And it wasn't just a Mihawk Seraphim he had to face. At the same time, even though he was injured and a bit tired, he still seemed determined to keep facing any enemy that came to fight them. Who is the enemy, Luffy? The world government and the pirates have been defeated. Vivi also approached, alongside Nojiko, who looked concerned. Luffy left the two blue-haired women and turned to Enel. Blackbeard is at a distance from here, isn't he? He asked. Enel, who was also injured, ended up turning in the direction Luffy was pointing. Yes. There's a ship 20 kilometers away. They're watching us. There's also someone flying in the sky, observing us. He said. That for Emperor Su. Kuina murmured. Blackbeard. Lucy spoke in a serious tone, while she was lying down after using her powers once again. She was at her limit now and would remain in that state for the day. Yes, that bastard. Does he think you can try to kill us in this state? Luffy said with a narrowed gaze. What will you do, Captain? Vipul approached without his wig, asking worriedly. Luffy looked at his crew. I'll deal with him alone. Wait, Luffy. You're tired. Yuta approached, looking stunned at Luffy, who wanted to face another four emperors after everything. It would be the third one he fought in a single night. It was madness, and his current state didn't seem to guarantee that he could withstand another fight. No. I'll go with you too, brother. Lucy exclaimed, trying to get up, but failing miserably. Wolf. Chouchou also barked. He was injured, his fur covered in blood due to the fight with that Cerberus to relieve some pressure off Luffy. Everyone knew that Luffy had focused on fighting that holy knight the entire time, someone as powerful as any four Emperor Su. And Blackbeard would be the third opponent of that level he would face, and alone once again. His crew, especially his wives, wouldn't let him do that without trying to stop him. I can handle this. Luffy spoke. Don't worry. I'll find a way. Luffy reinforced. Luffy. Alvida approached, showing a concerned expression, along with Robin. No more worrying. This is an order from your captain. I'll be back soon. Or do you think your man will fall so easily? Luffy spoke to his entire crew, as a captain, and as a husband to his wives. Wait. It was at that moment that Hancock landed on the ship, stomping her legs firmly. In the next instant, 20 people behind her assumed the same position without fail, hands on their waists, resembling a choreography. They were 20 mini Hancocks, created by the Seraphim Project, as the world government had multiplied their efforts, spending unimaginable resources to create them. We won't let you put yourself in danger. Hancock declared. Exactly, we won't let you put yourself in danger. And it wasn't just her. All 20 Hancock Seraphims shouted at the same time. We won't let you put yourself in danger. They reinforced, sounding like a chorus. In the midst of the battle, the Seraphims had been revealed. And, despite being surprised by the appearance of not just one, but multiple of them, Luffy quickly executed a plan. While throwing the Tenri Obito far away with an attack to buy time, he advanced toward the 20 Hancock Seraphims, hoping they would fall in love with him, just like the real Hancock had feelings for him. And everything worked out. All of them, upon seeing him, started to generate hearts in their eyes and stopped attacking anyone who had been petrified by their cuteness.
Luffy immediately made them fight for him, to the despair of the world government forces. There was a statue of an angel nearby, due to his request for the many Hancocks to petrify the Holy Knight. When they advanced, they caught the Tenri Obito by surprise. No matter how strong she was, against 20 beams from the Love Fruit model, Love Human Devil Fruit, she didn't even stand a chance to escape, also falling. For the cuteness of the children. Sorry. I'll have to go there. I want you all to stay here and, afterward, go back to Wano again, to Onigashima. After all, I'll be back soon. Gather all the bodies of our fallen comrades in the sea. We'll at least give them a proper burial after this. I'll make an announcement, and at the same time, I'll have to talk to the world government. Before anyone could respond to him, Luffy simply created his wings to fly more easily and spend less energy in the sky. He shot forward in the direction of Blackbeard. All the members of his crew could only watch him, hoping their captain would keep his word and return. Meanwhile, Van Augur quickly returned to the ship and stood before his captain, adjusting his eye accessory. "He is coming this way, Captain." He spoke, while Blackbeard looked at the sky for a moment before grinning. "Zahahaha. It seems they even emerged victorious against the world government. I admit, their strength is far beyond what I imagined. But they're tired, aren't they?" he asked. "Yes. The Straw Hats suffered many losses. Besides that, their own crew seems quite tired and wounded," Van Augur informed, while Blackbeard nodded. "Zahahaha. Looks like the plan is working. Let's see what he wants. Since he came alone, we can handle him easily, right, guys?" Blackbeard laughed, while his entire crew laughed along with him behind his back, except for the giant Sanyu on Wolf, who had stayed behind on Hikinazu, Blackbeard's home island. Luffy advanced quickly until he spotted the enemy ship. "Let's see if he can handle this," Blackbeard said, also spotting Luffy, while pulling his fist back, releasing the white aura of his Earthquake Fruit model, Tremor Human Devil Fruit. In the next moment, he threw a punch forward, shattering the space like glass, generating a powerful shockwave that advanced directly toward Luffy, alongside Blackbeard's Conqueror's Haki Lightning. Luffy saw the attack coming, breaking through the space, and clenched his fist. Flames mixed with red lightning from his ace sword and his own Conqueror's Haki. In the next instant, both attacks collided, with Luffy meeting the strike head-on with his sword. The entire space exploded where the two forces met. Even near Wano and on the island itself, the sound of the collision could be heard from afar, sweeping everything around. Blackbeard was surprised as red lightning crackled, clashing against the shockwave and canceling both forces. An explosion spread in all directions, with neither side emerging victorious. Luffy quickly advanced after that. Within seconds, his wings flapped with force, generating an intense gust of wind, and he suddenly stopped midair. He looked down, seeing Blackbeard with all his crew members pointing their weapons at him. "Blackbeard," Luffy commented with a rather dangerous look. "Zahahaha. You certainly still have great power. But you came here alone. Do you think you can handle me and my crew?" Blackbeard mocked, with a malicious grin. Luffy maintained a serious gaze, determined that he would have to kill that man if necessary. Chapter 487, The End of the Battles. "Zahahaha." Blackbeard's laughter echoed through the air as Luffy continued staring at him with cold eyes while his wings kept him steady in the sky. "You know you shouldn't be here, right?" Luffy said dangerously. "And why not? Did you want to keep all the fun to yourself, Straw Hat?" Blackbeard mocked. "Zahahaha." Luffy remained silent. "Can't we join the party too? But we might not even need to. After all, you came to us. It's fine if we all attack you right here, isn't it?" As he said this, all members of Blackbeard's crew seemed ready to fight, staring at Luffy as if he were an easy target. "Don't get ahead of yourselves. You won't get past this point," Luffy responded. He still wants to act tough. More than he should in his current state. "Sure, you of the Rain," said, taking a drag from his cigarette as he watched Luffy. He. He's a fine man. Such a shame we have to kill him." Katrina Devon said with a dark smile. "Let's fight." Jesus Burgess raised his arms, flexing his muscles in anticipation of fighting Luffy. Luffy toyed with his deck of cards, watching the Straw Hat with interest. Avalo Pizarro grinned. Van Augur also remained silent, waiting for any movement from Luffy while keeping his rifle aimed at him. Burp. Vasco Shot had his tongue hanging out but merely let out a small groan before releasing a loud belch. Doc Yu was lying on the ship's deck, looking exhausted, while his horse struggled to get up but seemed equally drained. "Straw Hat," Hughes murmured, peering through his lenses. "You all certainly seem eager. But you know, I could still wipe you all out," Luffy said as he began to release Crimson Conqueror's Haki. Everyone felt the force of that Haki, and all those who had been so confident suddenly seemed to lose it, instinctively stepping back, clearly intimidated by its presence. Blackbeard released his own Conqueror's Haki as well, forming a barrier to shield his crewmates. The two Haki forces clashed, and Blackbeard found himself momentarily taken aback, forced to retreat slightly as Luffy's Haki overwhelmed his own. "What kind of Haki is this?" he murmured. He knew of only one person who had this type of Haki. Shanks. "I never fully mastered this Haki until tonight. It always came out uncontrollably, and it was tough to keep it under control. But in my last battle against the world government over the past 5 hours, I truly managed to dominate it. Maybe I should thank them for that. After all, I've never felt this powerful before," Luffy said. "Don't think that just because you have that Haki, you can defeat us," Blackbeard shouted, trying to keep his Haki up to prevent Luffy's Crimson Conqueror's Haki from reaching them. Luffy then stopped releasing it. He wasn't in a condition where he could maintain it for long. Before approaching them, letting his wings dissipate, Blackbeard's pirates were stunned as Luffy simply descended from the sky and landed softly on the deck in front of them, his calm approach making them all grimace. "Don't look at me like that. I'm convinced I can kill you all," Luffy said, walking forward as if he were in his own home. Blackbeard continued to frown at Straw Hat, who remained unnervingly calm despite his injuries and visible exhaustion from fighting multiple powerful opponents in a single night. "Do you remember what happened at Maniford?" Luffy asked, stopping just a few meters away from Blackbeard and his crew. Blackbeard thought for a few seconds before his eyes widened in shock. "Exactly, Blackbeard. I don't know if I could survive it in my current state, and I know how it will punish me once I use it. But I will certainly use it now to destroy you all," Luffy said in a serious tone. All the confidence they had displayed earlier now seemed like a distant memory as they began to grasp his words. The thing he had used to fight against the Gorosei, who had invaded the war and been annihilated. How his punches had made the sea itself sink. That was not human. It was beyond any standard of strength in this world. Even among the most powerful. Blackbeard was undoubtedly afraid upon hearing that. He hadn't considered whether Monkey D. Luffy could use that, whatever it was. After all, he didn't even know how his ability worked. "I have the ability to do it, and I intend to use it. I wonder how many seconds you would last. How many bodies would remain intact, if they were torn apart or even vaporized by just one punch from me. I wonder how many of you could react to me releasing it at this very moment, while I deliver a blow, to the point that no one would be able to respond." Luffy spoke in a dark tone. Everyone immediately furrowed their brows, stepping back. They were ambitious, but if their lives were at stake, it was certainly useless to act recklessly. Luffy saw Blackbeard's stunned expression and continued. "Should I really use this power?" He left the question hanging in the air before turning his gaze solely to Blackbeard. "I wonder if you would survive as well. After all, I could kill you 3 times over," he said. "You know?" Blackbeard immediately exclaimed upon hearing Luffy's last words. "Maybe." Luffy smirked. "How do you know that?" he shouted while everyone else remained clueless about their captain's terrified reaction. "I have my ways. Either way, shall we fight? I'm asking because it won't end well for either of us. I may end up in a very bad situation after this. But I guarantee that none of you will survive." He spoke. Everyone stayed silent, but Luffy's enemies mostly shifted their gazes to their captain, who kept a cautious look on Luffy. He remained quiet for a moment before breaking into a grin, despite everything. "Zai ha 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 ha. Looks like he's got us cornered here. I wouldn't want to risk dying here, and surely, neither would my men," Blackbeard finally said. Luffy stayed silent while Blackbeard continued laughing. "We're turning back. But Straw Hat, don't think this is over. One day, we will have to fight for real, and by then, I won't have to fear your power anymore. I'll come at you with everything I have, and you know that very well," Blackbeard said. "When that time comes, I won't even need to resort to this, Blackbeard," Luffy mocked. "Zai ha ha ha. We'll see," Blackbeard said as Luffy took one last look at them before leaping into the air, releasing his black wings once more, gaining altitude. He turned back one last time, his crimson eyes locked onto Blackbeard, silently telling him that one day he would die by his hands. Then, with a powerful flap of his wings, Luffy shot off, heading back toward Wano beyond the horizon. "So in the end, we came all this way just to be intimidated." "Sure," you murmured with disdain. "It's better than dying. You certainly wouldn't have survived that thing we saw in Marineford," Katrina murmured. All the other crew members remained silent, realizing that, in the end, they had abandoned everything else just to come here. Only to turn back. "Captain." Van Augur spoke, seeing Blackbeard in silence. "Set course for our base. I'll be in my cabin," Blackbeard said as he entered his quarters, leaving the others to adjust the ship on their own. How does he know that? His fist slammed against the table. No one should know. He's dangerous. The voice was the same, but three different ways of speaking uttered the same words, as if from separate personalities. We must destroy him and steal his power. He's far too dangerous to let him keep conquering the new world. Tonight, he defeated 4 emperors and the strongest power the government has ever shown. There is no longer any doubt that from this night onward, Monkey D. Luffy would solidify what everyone had already been saying. They have become the most powerful pirate crew in the world. They are closer to the One Piece than anyone else. The One Piece must belong to us. We need to prove to the world that we are the kings of the pirates. No one knew about the discussion taking place inside that cabin. Blackbeard emerged once again, even though only 15 minutes had passed since he had entered. As he stepped outside, he saw his crew members carrying out their duties, guiding the ship. "Captain?" Burgess murmured. "Everyone, change of plans," he exclaimed, making all of them stop. "We're no longer heading to our base. We're going to Big Mom's territory. We're going after the Red Poneglyph. We're going to steal it from Straw Hat," he declared with a sinister grin. It was highly likely that Straw Hat would claim all the territories of the 4 emperors he had defeated. Taking the Red Poneglyph would be a direct move against him. Now that no one could stop them from reaching the former 4 emperors' main island. His crew quickly nodded in understanding, and the ship was steered in that direction as they advanced, leaving the Straw Hats behind. Unfortunately, Blackbeard would have to postpone his plans to consume and claim all those mythical zone fruits for another time. But he would certainly be better prepared when the moment came. Meanwhile, Luffy soared through the sky as Wano came into view. All the ships, both the Straw Hats' main vessel and their fleet, had left the waters beneath Wano, retrieving the bodies of their fallen comrades and allies, while their enemies still floated lifelessly in the sea. He saw everyone reorganizing around Onigashima and headed straight for the rooftop. "Luffy!" A chorus of voices rang out from several many Hancocks as Luffy was immediately noticed and welcomed. "Luffy! Are you okay?" Lucy jumped onto his brother, despite being bandaged up once again. "I managed to deal with them quickly, Captain." Usopp also approached. "I had to make some threats, even though I had to bluff," Luffy admitted. He knew that he truly didn't understand how to release the same power he had used at Maniford. Even so, he had been willing to do it if necessary. At the same time, he had needed to appear confident enough to scare off Blackbeard's pirates. And now, "Luffy?" Ute approached, along with everyone else, quickly surrounding him. "First, we'll contact Dressrosa and see how things are going there. After that, I'll speak with the world government," Luffy responded while picking up a Den Mushi. "Lastly, there will be a change for all of us from now on. But I'll be announcing that to the world as well." Luffy landed on a higher spot, with everyone gathering around him. It was time to settle the final matters. He held the Den Mushi, preparing to make the call to check on his children and everyone else. Though he was confident that those 2 old men could handle the government. Especially after they had already sent their main force here. Chapter 488, Aftermath. Luffy looked at his crew and the situation in front of him as he kept walking. "Keep taking care of the wounded. I'll check the situation in Dressrosa," Luffy requested as he deactivated the device. The people of Wano were still in Onigashima, staring at them in a daze after all the celebrations. They hadn't participated in the war, but they had certainly witnessed all the chaos in the hours that followed after the Straw Hats left the island. No one could understand what had happened there. They were just surprised that the Straw Hats had returned after all the chaos, and now Luffy had also come back as he made his way to the Black Pearl. "I'm going to check the situation in Dressrosa to see if they've restored communication, while you take care of the others," Luffy requested as he headed toward the communicator. "Enel. Disable the electromagnetic and lightning wave cancelling device," Luffy requested, and Enel complied. After all, the device blocked all communication, even their own. "Luffy, do you think Sinbad and the others are okay?" Vivi approached and asked, visibly worried. Luffy couldn't blame her. "They'll be fine, Vivi. Our children will be safe. Rayleigh and the others stayed there to protect them," Luffy reassured her as he waited for the connection to appear. He still had to wait for the other side to deactivate their device as well. One that Luffy had requested to be designed in order to prevent the government from learning about the war or gathering more data on them. By coincidence, communication was restored 20 seconds later, exactly when Luffy opened the channel. "Hello? Hello?" Gloriosa's voice came through, filled with concern. "Gloriosa, it's me, Luffy. How are things over there?" he asked as Vivi, Yamato, Robin, Yuta, and Hancock stepped closer, all worried about their sons and daughters. "It's a mess, Luffy. Those bastards invaded. They reached the city, but Rayleigh and Patrick Redfield managed to stop them along with the giants who stayed behind. The same goes for the other pirate groups and the animals. The remaining members of the kingdom's forces managed to protect everyone as well. Gloriosa reported, and Luffy nodded. Good. He said as he heard several sighs from his wives, all worried about the children. We managed to protect the children. Leo's voice came through another channel. He and the taunted the tribe had been safeguarding the children, acting as their personal guard while some pacifistas had tried to reach them, only to be destroyed. That's good. Tell Rayleigh to grab a Den Mushi. Luffy requested. I'm here, Luffy. Rayleigh's voice came through at that moment. Luffy sighed. Thank you for protecting my family and the kingdoms. It's alright. He replied. Anyway, we'll be heading there quickly before the government tries anything else. I just need to finish the last preparations. Luffy said. Daddy. Daddy. The voices of the children came through the channel as well. I'm coming to see you, my children. Stay safe until then. With that, Luffy hung up the Den Mushi. After all, he needed to finish his urgent tasks before attending to his children. The important thing was that they were safe after the attack and had managed to fend off the world government. In Dressrosa, Rayleigh and Redfield looked at the devastated city. Destroyed ships, wreckage everywhere. Rayleigh was slightly injured and exhausted. Even for him, that battle had been too intense. You really are getting old, Rayleigh. Redfield remarked, standing beside him, also wounded and surrounded by destroyed pacifistas and the bodies of fallen enemies. I'm not going to say I'm in my prime, but we made it in the end. Rayleigh responded. To think that the government would go this far just to kill a bunch of children and destroy these kingdoms. Just out of spite. Redfield scoffed. At that moment, the sounds of explosions began to echo. Giants were approaching, all still weary from battle. How many did you lose? Rayleigh asked Hadrudin, the leader of the giants. 2 of my comrades were killed, but they fought with honor. We will remember that, as we all knew the risks. He said solemnly. Rayleigh felt the weight of those words. Hey, can you guys clean up this mess? Redfield pointed at the wreckage around them. Let them catch their breath for a moment. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Rayleigh replied. Fujitora was looking at the destruction in that part of the city, seeing the bodies of both enemies and allies fallen on the ground, lost in his own thoughts. After everything, even with him being a hostage, the government had attacked at the same time. The Straw Hats hadn't killed him in retaliation, while the entire population of the kingdom had to leave the port as pirates and soldiers fought against the enemies. Back at the port, Rayleigh looked toward the horizon. The first signs of the sun's arrival were beginning to appear, illuminating the traces of destruction from that intense night. Rayleigh, this is what I want to do. A memory surfaced in Rayleigh's mind, and Luffy's voice echoed in his thoughts, speaking a few words. Hearing you say that makes me think you really do know about the Void Century, Rayleigh murmured in the memory. No, I don't. But I know this. He smiled. You do realize this is a direct challenge to the world government, and they will do everything to destroy you. They already do. Either way, I'm taking this as something symbolic. I intend to pass this hat to her. I won't be able to return it to Shanks after this. Are you sure? Will she really awaken in the war? He asked. Of course she will. She's almost there. Soon, people all over the world will hear her laughter. But you plan to put her somewhere else, don't you? You and your crew. Yes, you're right. The place where she needs to be. Lucy has always fought for justice. And in that, there's also the freedom of the world. Maybe, she can turn that group into an unstoppable force, Luffy said, though Rayleigh was a bit surprised by the plans he had for his sister. Rayleigh pushed that memory aside, his gaze still fixed on the horizon, contemplating Luffy's words. Perhaps the best time to announce this to the world was now. Redfield sat down, but Rayleigh continued watching as the horizon grew brighter. He sighed, thinking about his crew and whether, at some point, the future would truly become like this. Meanwhile, Luffy was analyzing the situation. He picked up another Den Mushi. The one he had asked Lamy to steal in the middle of the war against the world government. This device was directly connected to the elders. Now, let's talk to them. Luffy said as he began to dial. In Mary Joey's, communication was still down. The screens remained off, and no signals had been received since Luffy had cut them off hours ago. The Grossi had not allowed any of the kings to leave, despite the growing discomfort. They wanted everyone to witness the destruction of the Straw Hats, sending a message to the world. The representatives of the East Blue Kingdoms maintained worried expressions. Among them was a king from Luminarchy, present because that territory was a secret. He kept a calm gaze, trying to mask his concern. Deep down, he knew that the Straw Hat might have survived. Everyone remained silent, until suddenly, one of the screens flickered back to life. It seems we're back. One of the Grossi murmured, analyzing the screen as it powered on again. All eyes turned to the screen, waiting to see who would appear. The first image transmitted was of the sky, still dotted with stars, while the first rays of sunlight emerged. Then, slowly, the camera began to turn, and the figure of Luffy appeared on the screens of all the kings of the world government. The Gorosei's eyes widened, stunned to see him smiling. "I believe this isn't what you were expecting," Luffy said, his smile widening even further, clearly amused by the situation. This can't be possible," one of the Gorosei exclaimed, in disbelief. "Of course, it's possible," Luffy replied. "All of your forces were destroyed, except for one person who managed to escape. I must admit, that copy of Shanks was quite slippery," he said. "No. This can't be happening." They looked incredulous. "You underestimated us after everything," Luffy continued. "You thought that sending nearly 2,000 pacifistas along with the Seraphim, those damned androids, and government agents from Cypher Paul Zero Agent as well as other members would be enough to actually stop us. Did you really believe I wasn't prepared for this?" He laughed, shaking his head. "As always, you failed to keep your word. You claimed you wouldn't intervene in the war, but you always try to pull the strings from behind and betray. After all, you are not trustworthy. Your words mean nothing." He then looked directly at the screen, directing his words to the kings and queens who were watching the transmission. "This goes for all of you too. To the kings and queens present in this room. The world government is not trustworthy. They manipulate and lie whenever they deem it necessary to ensure their plans and ambitions remain intact. It would be foolish to trust them after what happened today. You saw it for yourselves. Their words mean nothing, and one day, this could destroy you as well." Luffy took pleasure in throwing this truth in the faces of those old men. "You have no right to say that," one of the Gorosei exclaimed angrily, unleashing his haki in fury. Immediately, all the kings in the room felt the overwhelming pressure, swallowing hard as fear took hold of them. "Oh, but I do," Luffy replied, unfazed. "As you can see, I had to destroy a large part of your forces. I wonder, how many resources did you waste on this? Furthermore, you even launched an attack against those who carry my flag, and you tried to harm even my children." None of the Gorosei could respond at that moment. Silence dominated the room, while the kings had varied expressions, stunned by what they were witnessing on the screen. "Let the whole world know." Luffy raised his voice. "We defeated 4 emperors and destroyed the entire fleet sent by the world government. And this was a night of multiple wars and battles to prove something here." His gaze grew more serious. "I want everyone to know and remember this, we are the most powerful pirate crew in the world. The strongest that has ever existed. Not even the world government can stop us," he declared. "You don't know who you're talking to, boy," one of the Gorosei shouted. "You may have caught us off guard and won this battle, but we will use everything we have to destroy you. You are openly declaring war against the stability of this world." Luffy laughed. "What a load of nonsense, bunch of old men." He kept his gaze cold, as if staring directly at each of them. "We've been in open conflict ever since you tried to hurt my family. Now, I consider this an all-out war." Silence filled the room. All the kings and queens present swallowed hard, while the Gorosei, overwhelmed by anger, began to unleash their haki. The tension was palpable. But Luffy remained firm, openly defying them in front of everyone. Chapter 489, announced to the whole world, "We are the Dawn Pirates. Look at you." Luffy sneered, sensing the haki of the elders while hearing the kings and queens scream in fear. "I really offended you, huh?" Luffy mocked. "You dare keep mocking us, damn pirate?" Another Gorosei exclaimed, and John imagined it was Saint Topman Warcurry. "I can't help it. After all, even though I already knew you would attack us, so I prepared for it, my rage at this moment is uncontrollable." Luffy began, while everyone looked at him with cautious expressions. Luffy no longer seemed to have a filter when speaking to those elders. "My will is to kill every single one of you, destroy you, and watch you burn. Until the last pieces of you disappear from this world once and for all. I enjoyed killing each one of you, and I intend to do more." Luffy spoke through clenched teeth while crushing 2 more hearts, belonging to 2 Tenri Obito, who were also among the Holy Knights. "You!" They couldn't even speak as they watched Luffy burn the last 2 Tenri Obito hearts he had, while the one he had captured and another Tenri Obito in Maniford fell dead. The Gorosei exploded with haki once again as they began to spread chaos once more. "You killed so many Tenri Obito at the same time and did it publicly. No one has ever had the courage to do that. We will destroy you, and we will start with the home countries of your entire crew." They no longer hid their hatred for Monkey D. Luffy, while the kings seemed terrified, and all those who came from East Blue felt fear, for they were now threatened with death. King Dalton, along with others, darkened their expressions, knowing they were also included in this. Luffy simply smiled, despite the worried looks of all his crew members, who feared the fate of their homelands. Vippo, prepare to send meteors all over the world. I want them aimed at every country that is part of the world government. Get ready to destroy them all at once. Luffy ordered, his voice louder than usual. Luffy? Ute exclaimed, shocked, while everyone else also looked at Luffy in horror. He intended to destroy nearly 200 kingdoms and countries. You plan to start an extermination? Nami also cried out, never expecting something like this from Luffy. Meanwhile, in Mary Jo's eyes, everyone felt the ground disappear beneath them. The king stood up, stunned. He plans to destroy most of the 170 kingdoms? This can't be. My kingdom will be destroyed? How can he do something like this? The kings trembled in fear. Not all 170 representatives were present, as some had abandoned the world government, making their stance clear at this moment. But hearing that the world government's conflict would escalate into a worldwide catastrophe did not seem like the ideal outcome for this meeting. Even the Gorosei had shaken expressions, their arrogance now diminished. You can't be serious. St. Marcus Mars murmured. You want to threaten our homes? Fine, then. By the end of this war, you will only have Mary Jo's left, while the rest of the world will be nothing but ashes. Luffy responded with rage. You're bluffing. Saint Shepherd Jupiter said, but his voice carried hesitation. You can bet on it. The world government will be nothing after this. Luffy roared so loudly that even people in Wano could hear his voice. There was no response from the other side, only the heavy breathing of the kings and queens, knowing that their kingdoms could be destroyed depending on how this conversation unfolded. Their lives, families, lands, and riches were now at the mercy of a possible war between a pirate and the world government. Something that had never happened in this world's history, at least not in recorded history. The tension also weighed on the Straw Hats as they waited for their captain to handle this horrible situation. After all, none of them wanted this either. But no one could say anything, as the crew remained silent. We also don't want the destruction of this world. We will not attack the kingdoms of your origins. But we also do not want you to attack any kingdom that is part of the world government. Shepherd Jupiter finally spoke. Obviously, the world government and all those who controlled it needed all the countries that made up the strength of the 170 kingdoms under its rule. After all, the organization that controlled the world was funded by them, and destroying them would not only mean a loss of resources but also labor. Luffy knew this, and the world government would never allow something like that to happen. That was why they did not react to his threat, even though it was more cruel than anything Luffy had ever done, and certainly, many kings would remember it. He needed to counter any action from the world government after what had happened with something equally alarming or even more severe. It was no coincidence that Luffy came from a world where multiple countries had nuclear weapons. Even though there was peace, that balance would change if only one of them possessed such a weapon, disrupting the balance of power and threatening the world with those who wielded it. The same thing applied to the government here. All the countries were on their knees before them because they were much more powerful and always ensured they remained that way. What Luffy was doing now was creating a confrontation that the government could not simply ignore. It was a fight that would be bad for both sides, cornering even the mighty world government. Luffy and the world government would both lose a lot in this battle, which would eventually force them into an agreement. They did not care about sacrificing a dozen countries, but losing all the kingdoms that served them would create a crisis greater than any other in the history of this world, even if they managed to eliminate the Straw Hats in the end. But it wasn't because they loved the countries or their kings. All 170 kingdoms that were part of the world government were nothing more than sources of resource extraction. They were the government's cattle, which needed to be preserved. After all, what would Mary Jo's be without external resources? Without technological production, essential goods, and even the slaves and labor for the celestial nobles? It would be disastrous. Even though most people in this world did not have visible chains around their necks, the world government treated the entire world as its slaves, ready to serve them. So, what will you do? Luffy finally spoke.